I'll try.
Just
Just gonna do it.
Joey, Councillor Hoare was going to try and zoom in.
Yeah, I'm connected with her. We're waiting for her. She's just waiting to get to the right spot. Okay, we're live.
All three planners are here. This must be a big one.
You guys got closed agenda?
Oh.
It
No.
won't be on your.
Oh, I did not.
It's on the tablet as well.
Oh, it is?
Oh, I did.
Assumed
I
it would
did
be.
get it, but it's not.
We can get your bigger copy, so it's very brief.
Welcome, everyone. This regular council meeting is called to order at 4 o'clock on January 24th, 2023. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelethat on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Are there any late items? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson,
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. There are 3 sets of minutes for adoption today. The first minutes are from the December 8th, 2022 special council meeting. Any errors or omissions? May I have a motion to adopt the December 8th, 2022 special council meeting minutes as presented?
I'll move.
Councillor Mafty,
A second.
Councillor Anderson. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The next minutes are from the December 13th, 2022 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the December 13th, 2022 regular council meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. That was Councillor Kennington that moved? Yes, okay, thanks. And any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The last minutes are from the January 10th, 2023 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? No? May I have a motion to adopt the January 10th, 2023 regular council meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson,
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. We have 2 delegations this evening. Please limit your delegation to 10 minutes if possible. Our first delegation is from the United Way. I understand that this delegate is attending by Zoom. Is that correct, Mr. Rotenberg?
Yes, I've just promoted the delegate, and we will make them a co-host in a moment.
Good evening.
Welcome.
I'm just waiting for my colleague, Julie Rushton, to also join us.
So you would be Signe Madden?
That's correct.
Great. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Julie's got her hand raised. I'm not sure. There she goes. Hi, Julie.
Hello, good afternoon. My video is turned off and it won't turn on, so apologies. It's talking to me about I was made, something about the settings from the, maybe from the tech department.
We'll look into it for you.
Okay. Oh, there it comes. It's on now. Thank you.
And have we got our slides there?
No, it'd be best actually if you shared your slides from your computer.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Sorry. Thank you for your patience.
And I'm going to share my screen.
So my name is Signe Madden, and I've been United Way for over 10 years. And I wanted to congratulate the mayor, Your Honor, and the council members on your recent election. And just excited to be working with you and talk a little bit about the social issues facing our many communities on Vancouver Island and in particular in your community. So thank you for allowing us to present. Julie will introduce herself in a couple of slides. And as I said, I've been with United Way on Vancouver Island for over 10 years. I'm based out of Nanaimo. Julie works out of Port Alberni, but we also fund and support communities all up and down the island, north of the Malahat. So just in terms of slide 2, if you could go to there, Julie. I'm not sure everybody is aware, but I'll just speak to, and in 2021, we amalgamated several United Ways across British Columbia into United Way BC. And so you can see our jurisdiction, it's everywhere except Northern BC and South Vancouver Island. And one of the reasons that we decided to amalgamate, we used to be on the island, CNVI, Central and Northern Vancouver Island. And why we decided to amalgamate was one of the pieces we were seeing is the larger organization allowed us to test things in one community, push for public policy at the provincial or federal level, and then implement things across the province, in particular community programs that were supporting some of the greatest needs we were seeing on the ground. And so we're still local, but we're also, we know that things like homelessness, housing issues, food security, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, are across our province. And if we're going to tackle them, it's a partnership with municipalities, with the provincial government, and now often with the federal government as well. So what we're pleased to continue to do is to listen to communities, hear what's needed, learning from local health networks, other community tables, bring that back so that we can develop policy and or programs that are going to be effective. And working with our municipalities is key. So we wanted to share with you what we're seeing, what we're doing, and also invite to be more involved and engaged with Ucluelet. And besides, I love to vacation there every year, several times a year. So any excuse that I can have to come and hang out at Ucluelet is good by me. So one of the things we're seeing is obviously, we can speak about it, is the local issues around homelessness and housing. So I'm going to hand it over to Julie. She can talk about what we're investing in the region and some of the challenges the communities are facing.
Okay, great. Thank you, Signe. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Julie Rushton, and today I'm coming to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Nanaimo people in Nanaimo. working in our Nanaimo office today. But I traditionally, I live in Port Alberni, and so I'm often visiting in Ucluelet with my family. And I really want to recognize too that I typically work on the traditional territories of the Nuu-Channel and or the Nuu-Channel people, specifically Tishat and Hupacheset. So we really do we have a lot of conversations in community around what's happening in terms of needs, and this has been this process is informed by a provincial landscape, and so really looking at what's happening across the province, and then how do we bring that down into individual communities and really look at what are the needs of local communities. And so some things that we look at are inflation is a huge issue in communities across the board right now. Rising cost of housing and the lack of inventory. So, I know that housing is an issue in Ucluelet as well. And there's rural challenges to accessing social services. So when we're looking at, if you are living in Ucluelet and your service is in Tofino, how are you getting there? And I know that the transportation has been a concern, and at certain points you haven't had that transportation, but that's definitely an issue that's been raised, and the need for rapid and coordinated response to emergencies. So we saw that in the Cowichan Valley 2 years ago. We saw it in emergencies happening. We saw the wildfires, those emergencies, and United Way was able to respond in a local capacity. I really wanted to talk about some of the ways that we work to strengthen community. And in Ucluelet, there's a few pieces that we're working on. So West Coast Pacific Rim Hospice, they receive funding for us to do their Better at Home and Safe Seniors projects. We attend the Coastal Family Resource Coalition meeting, and that meeting is really important to us because we really learn what's happening for families and other community members at that local table, and we can meet with partners while we're there visiting and really get a better understanding of the needs in community and how we might support to fill in some of the gaps that might exist in services. We also attend and participate in the Alberni-Clayoquot Health Network meetings. So that's another opportunity for us to really keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the region and look to building solutions with partners. And then we also do every year we look at period promise. So we really work on period equity. We want to ensure that everyone who menstruates has the ability to access these services. So these supports. So what we've done is we have put into place mechanisms to actually distribute supply to community members and or to community organizations, I should say. And so I'm really happy to say that we were successful in putting in products to Ucluelet last year, and we look forward to doing so again. It's really another really key piece is BC 2-in-1. So BC 2-in-1 is a provincial initiative, and we that service is available to all folks, whether they're phoning or texting or using the service online. And then I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about our food infrastructure grants. We affectionately call them FIG grants, and what those initiatives do is they really work to build local capacity to work on food security issues in the region. So business plans are created, and they're created by the organizations, and we have food infrastructure grants in excuse me for my pronunciation, Uchaklaset and Tokwat. So there's 2 food infrastructure grants there, and what those grants are doing is really looking at bringing back traditional ways of not only harvesting but curing and ensuring that the foods are prepared and stored effectively for consumption. It would be an error to not let you know about our current funding opportunities. So right now we have Community Service Recovery Fund, which is a federally funded grant. And so there are 3 streams: Program and Service Innovation, which is United Way is hosting; Systems and Processes, which is Community Foundations. So you might have heard from Clayoquot Biosphere Trust that they're doing some granting. And then Investing in People is being looked after by the Red Cross. So our stream is really around program and service innovation. And what we're looking at is, how did organizations need to pivot in response to COVID? And what were some of the pieces that came out of that learning that we could support organizations to continue to facilitate, buy, use, etc. So if organizations are in need of computer supplies or different mechanisms for different ways of working, then this fund would come in and support them. In addition to that, we also have our Indigenous grants, and we're really looking at healing and building capacity. So we're looking for Indigenous organizations, nations, Inuit, Métis, First Nations, as I mentioned. They're able to apply for this fund and really work on what's happening in their community around healing, and what services could they put in place that would promote additional healing and the building of capacity. So those are 2 opportunities that are out right now. And I also wanted to just talk a little bit about the actual raising of funds. So United Way has a policy that all funds raised locally stay local. And that's really important, because as I travel around our region, I hear often from people, if I raise money here and you're a provincial organization, what happens to my funds? And the answer is, your funds stay local. So if UQLIT raises funds, UQLIT has access to those funds to provide services and supports in community. So if that is of interest to this council, or in your community conversations after this, if people are interested in that, we'd be more than happy to have a conversation and support the campaign building for your region. And with that, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I know you're all very busy, and so time was precious, and thank you so much. Have a great day. I guess I should ask if there's any questions as well.
Thank you. Any questions from council? No, I think we're good. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the information about the grants.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks again for your time, and have a super week.
You too.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Our second delegation is from the Pacific Rim Home Development Cooperative. And I understand there is a representative attending in person and by Zoom. Welcome, Mr. Olawa. And we have one attending via Zoom.
Through the mayor, I've just promoted Oki from Green Violin. I believe that's the other member attending.
That's correct.
Representative attending by Zoom. Just waiting for him or her to turn on their video and mic.
There he is. Welcome.
All right.
Welcome,
Thank you,
Mr.
and good
Olawa.
afternoon.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing us to present here today. Again, my name is Randy Olawa, and I am the president of the Pac Rim Home Development Cooperative located here in Ucluelet, BC. We are a cooperative of area businesses focused on creating employee housing for our members. The PRHDC is a multi-stakeholder cooperative comprised of our membership, and our membership is open to everyone. I just wanted to touch on a couple of highlights. So our 2022 highlights, to which there were many. So we had a meeting in the spring with the CAO and the planner, and they replied by a letter, but they expressed some concerns with the possible inability of the Pac Rim Home Development Cooperative receiving support from the local municipality because of just some uncertainties. We took that reply and we took it to heart, and we got back to work. We went back to our our association, which would be Cooperatives First, who have helped us immensely over the last 3 years. And what we did was we R&R'd our Articles of Incorporation. So your Articles of Incorporation are something that your entity, it's basically your founding documents of your entity. And it outlines how you're going to operate. Our prior Articles of Incorporation were recognized as a not-for-profit by CMHC and the Federation Canadian Municipalities, to which we, under the Federation Canadian Municipalities, we did receive a planning grant in 2022. So we were still looking for support from our local government and BC Housing. So since the effort to go back to Cooperatives First and really develop take another kick at the can at our Articles of Incorporation, we are quite confident now that our Articles of Incorporation, combined with our usage, how we're going to operate, the district will find that we are absolutely a not-for-profit, non-market housing developer here in Ucluelet, located here in Ucluelet. Around that time, we also discovered an amazing not-for-profit housing developer based out of Edmonton. The company is called the Green Violin, and the owner-operator of the Green Violin, Yasushi Oki, is presenting here with me today. So through the grant funding, once you received the grant funding, we've done all the work. We have 6 milestones in the grant proposal. We've completed all 6, and we've now all actually submitted our final report to the FCM for their stamp of approval. But through that process, some of the things we needed to do was become more public. We wanted to make sure our concept was good, and we're now confident enough to bring it to public and open it up to membership. We did that this fall with a very successful membership drive, and we followed that up with an annual general meeting. We're happy to report that we have 3 new board members on our board, and we're up to 11 business memberships currently. Now, before I go into our next steps and our asks and why we're here today, I would like to bring in Mr. Oki to let him introduce himself. And Yasushi will be directing the technical planning process involved to create this project. So I'll pass it off to you.
All right,
Yasushi.
Thanks, Randy. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thanks for letting me join in on this conversation. I'm super excited. My name is Yasushi Oki. I'm the Executive Director of Green Violin. We started up here in Edmonton, but I'm finding that I'm advocating for housing across Canada, literally from Ucluelet on one coast to St. John on the other coast, St. John's. So this is super exciting. Green Violin was incorporated 3 years ago as a nonprofit land development company. My background is civil engineering from the U of A, as well as architecture degree from UBC. But when I returned to Edmonton, which is where I grew up, although I was born in Vancouver, so the coast has a really strong pull for me, I was recruited by Qualico Land Developers as a project manager in land development. And so I've had a career in land development. We patted ourselves on the back and we thought we were developing Edmonton in a nice, orderly fashion. But in the downturns in the economy, because Alberta is a oil boom and bust economy, I would jump into civil service. So I've worked at Strathcona County as a development officer. I've worked at Alberta infrastructure, which is the Alberta government, as a project manager. And most recently, I worked at the City of Edmonton in housing and homelessness. And this is where the story really starts, in that I was made aware of call it the damage developers do by providing a higher range of housing options than what Edmontonians need. That is to say, 30% of Edmontonians were living in inadequate and unattainable housing. Even though by the country's standards, Edmonton housing is affordable, we're still finding through our stats that affordability is an issue here in Edmonton. Whether it's because of my engineering or my architecture background, I've been collecting ideas on different ways of tackling affordability and housing economy. So to wrap it up, my 5-year mission is to innovate, demonstrate, and pilot new housing forms. And part of that is tiny home communities, cluster living, densification, and the missing middle. Over the last 3 years, I've got a portfolio of projects that are going into the ground, and through advocacy for housing, I've met wonderful organizations like Randy's Pacific Rim Employee Housing Cooperative, and we are working together to bring some of these projects to light, chasing grants, analyzing land holdings, and going right through to construction and occupancy for those who are in need of housing. So thank you.
Thank you, Yasushi. So our next steps for 2023, we're off and running. This is great. So we've sort of we're wrapping up. The first planning grant we're calling phase 1. It's been a 3-year slog, but we've learned a lot. But we're now moving into phase 2. And what we need to move into phase 2, because if we don't gather support and really get into a groove here, we can't see the project actually continuing on. As an organization, we put 3 years of volunteer time into this. We've approached the council or district several times. And for whatever reason, we just haven't been able to actually springboard ourselves into this next phase 2. But it was also, as a Canadian, I'm going to apologize for everyone. I will also take some of that burden ourselves, is that we were discovering our own strengths and our own weaknesses within our own teams. And we all know that there have been several challenges over the last couple of years. But we're still here. We've come through the other side. We're hopeful that we'll get our support from council today or over the next few weeks, and we'll be able to really knock this thing out of the park. We haven't kept going this long because, there's something here, and we need to really flush this out. So we see our co-op, the members, the board, the group, as our next phase for us will be offering free co-op training to our board members and area communities through Cooperatives First. I highly encourage anyone, if nothing else happens out of this, check out Cooperatives First if you're interested in developing a form of cooperative. They are an amazing team to work with, and their website is one of the most comprehensive and easy to use websites I've ever seen. Today, we're here to gain further support from Mayor and Council to perform land mapping, including infrastructure. Council, as new councillors, you have a tool, a toolkit available to you. One of those tools that you have available to you is to form what's called a select committee. When I sat on council for 10 years, we discovered this ourselves. We formed several select committees, and we found them very effective. They were focused, they were a team effort, and it didn't drag on for years and years with endless budgets and spending. It was comprised of a very focused group focusing on one topic, and at the end of a 3-month term, that group brought back a report to council with recommendations and subsequent budgets, and most of them were quite successful. So we're asking for council today to explore the formation of a select committee comprised of members of council, 1 to 2 would be great, the PRHDC team, our non-market housing developer, municipal planning staff, and other partners for this purpose. Our goal is to identify available and future lands for non-market development. I say available in future lands because we have heard that, I mean, the district is strapped for land, but we do have large landholders we do have large landholders that are coming forwards or that will be coming forwards. And at the very least, even through our 90-day process, we would be able to help work with planning, and because we are a community group, to identify some rapid responses that council could use to secure their current rental market, the current rental housing they have, and identify the district lands that are serviced, and put help with for the formation of bylaws and policies that would direct future land developers to contribute to what we'd like to see is a formation of a land bank in Ucluelet. Once the parcel of land that will be discovered will be identified, we'll create a construction budget, and then after the 3 months, if not sooner, we'll be able to bring that report back to council with our recommendations and findings. So that was a lot. I'm pretty sure I'm over 10 minutes, but we are welcome to answer any questions you have. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Randy. Any questions for Mr. Olawa? Councillor Kennington.
Through the mayor. How many businesses do you have currently signed up?
Through our last drive, we have 11, but I just looked at it today and they missed mine, so we're up to 12 businesses.
And how many of those businesses are local to Ucluelet and how many are from Tofino?
What we found through this early development was a lot, to answer the question, we have two from Tofino. Yes, two from Tofino. One is not the two, but out of the current ones, two from Tofino. But what we're finding too is that it's the large companies that are coming forwards at this time. They have staff that are available to attend our meetings and our open houses. And we sort of see that as the larger companies maybe come in, they're still restricted under the cooperative model to the number of units they could purchase. And they're also restricted by, it doesn't matter if you had 1 unit or 5 units. At the board table, you have 1 vote. Everybody is an equal. So, sorry.
Through the mayor, follow-up question. Have you approached the District of Tofino for support, given that a percentage of the sign-ups are from Tofino?
We have not approached the District of Tofino yet. And it would be a highlight of yet.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just
Councillor Mafty.
through the mayor, one quick question. I'm somewhat familiar with the broad strokes of this project, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate on the relationship between a potential renter and their employer and how their ability to rent would be connected to their employment. Like, hypothetically speaking, if someone's in there and they quit their job or they're fired, what's the follow through?
So currently, it's not specific to the PAC Rim. The legislation's already out there, and we already have multiple businesses purchasing residential homes in Ucluelet for staff accommodations. We have actually partnered with or discussed with or had meetings with those organizations to draw on their expertise. We have no legal budget, so we weren't able to actually get a lawyer to draft up our own sort of an employee-employer employment agreement. But those companies have been able to share them with us. They're into this. They want open transparency. So what these companies are doing is, and it's they, as a condition of employment, they sign a employee contract that is tied to housing. One of the benefits of the residential, the only benefits of the residential tenancy branch legislation that aids business is that they still have a 30-day eviction legislation or policy. So those businesses that are currently renting or owning houses in Ucluelet or wherever that are housing their staff in them have those employees under an agreement, an employee agreement that is tied to their employment, which ties their housing. So, an example would be if that employee decided if they didn't make probation, or for whatever reason they decided to not continue their employment, and it was on the 15th of the month, that employer-employee relationship, hopefully it ended really well, best for everyone. They would be given their termination and eviction, but they would be allowed to stay for the remainder of that month and then the 30 days following that. But that's the only legislation that's still in there that sort of helps business.
Thank
Hope
you.
that answers your question.
Thank you.
And again, that's not where we're getting into. We are we have the operating agreement to operate the housing, and our agreements are between the cooperative and the business. The business is our primary members, but even in their packages that they get, the employees become members as well. So there is a feedback loop. I'm envisioning our needs was 110 employees. So I'm envisioning 40, 50, 60 employees forming a housing group where they have 2 representatives that also participate and feed their input back to the cooperative. I mean, that's how we're going to find out if our end users, which are the employees, are happy. How can we improve this? How can we, what changes need to be made? So there's a full feedback loop, and that's the beauty of a co-op. We're all pulling together. It's communication, and it's being connected. So,
Councillor Anderson, anything?
Quick question: given the nature of the seasonal work out here, would you find that there would be times of the year with vacancy, and thoughts around that?
yeah, so we did have a couple of smaller businesses, and I've been in housing here in Ucluelet forever, and I'll give you an example. A local airline company calls me and wants to rent for 6 months of the year at $650 a month. They're not finding that. It's not going to happen. But to answer your question, we want to sit with our group and work out innovative ways. So the business is required to pay their $500 membership, which would get them a unit of housing. They're also required to cover the rent for a minimum of 12 months. Our target rent is $800 for a single 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit. So even a small business, those are fairly affordable rates, especially when your employee you'll be recovering the cost of the rent from the employee. So your $500 initially, $800 a month for 12 months is your commitment as a small business for your unit of housing. Your employee then pays the rent to the business, which offsets that cost to the business. But again, the businesses have said, I only need it for 8 months. So we absolutely see a waiting list, and we want to work with those businesses, but it would be up to the business to say, hey, I'm only using it for 8. I'm on the hook for 12. I want to introduce you to Randy's Dog Walking Company, and they would want to buy a membership. So they buy a membership, they get on the list, and there's cohesiveness, there's communication, so we can then put that. We don't ever want to see these units empty. So yes, we're working on mechanisms to help the seasonal business as well, but to get off the ground, we do need to focus. And that focus would be a rapid response to housing and get maybe even tier it off to where you get the units built that are 12 months of the year first and take it off in a different chunk. But again, that's getting into the weeds. But we absolutely see these units full all the time, and we see a cooperation between businesses for sure.
Thank you.
I learned something today from you that I didn't realize. I thought you were looking for one chunk of land to put this housing proposal on, but really it could be several smaller chunks of land.
It could be. I'm glad you asked that because we have Yasushi here. So our brains are just exploding with ideas. But there could be, in a perfect world, yes, we could put 100 units of housing at the rec hall, put a sewer line down there, boom, everybody's happy. But why not go with 10 units here, 6 units there, 5, whatever the land can hold. this is not a permanent development in such that is a landing pad for employees for 1 to 2 years. We see them getting into, first of all, the businesses can hire safe and affordable housing, not susceptible to the seasonal bounce. We'll rent to you in the winter and you're out in the spring. So businesses can grow and develop. We see this opening that up. So those businesses will be able to thrive, plan, hire, grow. But yes, it could be in multiple places. We've also talked about tiny homes and backyards. The current model that's out there with the carriage homes and that type of stuff, it just doesn't work. It was just on the news last week. You got a $500,000 build in the backyard, and then your property taxes go up, and you're trying to provide affordable rent to somebody at $1,200 a month. It just doesn't. It's a failed system. So why not, in a long stretch, these open up even people's have the ability to have an agreement with residential people where the co-op can come in, take control of the backyard, place the tiny unit in there, the co-op manages it all, and some sort of, I've got a lot of ideas on it, but some sort of a tax benefit that doesn't hinder the landowner, the person that lives in that house that just wants to use that backyard to provide somebody with year-round employment. But they're not going to do it if they have to build a $500,000 tiny home. It's going to take them 2 years to construct. The property value is going to go up. It doesn't make business sense. This does.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Mr. Oki, any further comments from you?
Just super excited. I love Ucluelet vacation there. And I think housing is top of mind across Canada. So solutions that we find here in Edmonton are applicable across Canada, and hopefully some of them land in Ucluelet. So thank you for the opportunity and the consideration to get some of our projects going there.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
Olowa.
You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, just one final plug. We did get a call. We are on February 7th at 8 p.m. We're on, tune in, we're on Cooperative Radio. It's a whole hour just talking housing in Canada. So thank you again. Your agenda looks great, so I'm going to stick around.
Thank you. Is there any unfinished business? No, seeing none. There are 5 report items. The first report is item 7.1, Covenant Modification and Development Variance Permit, 2010 Sinamaka Road. This report, Councillor Hoare, hello.
Hi, I just wanted to let everybody know that I have pretty dodgy Wi-Fi where I am. I'm listening in, but I'm going to turn my video off to preserve that Wi-Fi signal. So I'm here, I'm listening, promise.
Thank you for that. Okay, the first report is item 7.1, Covenant Modification and Development Variance Permit, 2010 Sinamaka Road. This report will be presented by the Director of Community Planning, Bruce Gregg. After the Director of Community Planning presents, the applicant will have an opportunity to speak. Welcome, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, through the mayor. And I'm going to share a couple of slides that might be helpful, but I think I need to be promoted within the Zoom call. Share my screen. Okay. Bear with me. Mr. Rotenberger just says it's screen sharing was disabled for me. Here we go. And yes, here we are. it says 221 Monado Road. No, that's not what this is, but it's the right map. So the first application here, this is a covenant modification and development variance permit have been applied for the property at 2010 Cinnamalka Road, which is on the, as you can see on the screen, is on the corner with Lorne White Place. And so this proposal is for an accessory building, really for a backyard office that the owners would like to place on the property. The property is zoned CD5C is the subzone, which allows single-family residential uses and some accessory uses. So the variance part that they would need for their proposal for the placement of this sort of detached accessory building for an office would be to vary a side yard setback. There's also a green space covenant that's registered on the property, and we're kind of starting there. But essentially, in order to place this building and where they prefer to locate it, it would need both the approval of the covenant under the covenant from council as well as the variance. So. The key restriction in the covenant, I'll just speak with the covenant, and it's noted in the staff report from our planning assistant, is the grantor, the owner of the property, covenants and agrees not to construct, erect, or place any building or structure in the setback area, and also that it would not use the setback area for any use other than green space or a driveway. So the placement of a building would be sort of prohibited by that contractual term that's registered on the title of their property. And as noted in the report, like staff sort of struggle to see that there would be a public benefit from approving this request, and or even sort of a neutral outcome, a potential for some implications that could have negative impacts on the sort of community interest. As noted in the report, it granting it could reduce or the green space and erode the effectiveness of the established covenant, including potentially greater impact on the neighboring property, and also sets a precedent for other property owners to apply for modifications of the covenant and setbacks. That it was placed in the subdivision with an intent, and we're really not seeing the case for it. But council should provide an opportunity to hear from the applicant, the property owner, or their agent, and also the council does have options, as noted on page 39 of the agenda. Having heard from the owner, to direct staff to proceed with the covenant modification and notice. In which case, we would start with giving the notice for the development variance permit. I'll see if there's any questions from council. I can certainly attempt to answer them, or perhaps hear from the applicant.
Any questions from council?
Not at this point.
I have one. I think it's pretty obvious. This is a covenant that's on all the neighboring properties, correct?
Yes, it was part of the subdivision approval. So with maybe some minor variations, but really it's Ocean West, as it's developed in phases, has had this green space covenant. So we run into similar things on Rainforest Drive and some of the other surrounding streets as well.
Thank you.
Councilor
Mafty?
Through the mayor. So just in reference to Rainforest Drive, my understanding that the green space and the setbacks in that subdivision are through a strata, like through strata bylaws, and it was the setbacks were established by the strata. And I'm wondering if I'm misunderstanding or if there's a difference between setbacks established through a strata versus through a covenant with.
Oh boy, here we go. So little different context. So Ocean West has developed over time in a number of phases, and so some of this, what it was registered as covenants on the properties as part of the subdivision, was initially committed to as part of a master development agreement with Weyerhaeuser Corporation. Rainforest was a little different. It's not a strata subdivision, so they're not bare land strata. So there are covenants on some of those titles. Without having them in front of me, I really can't answer some of the details and the differences, but I think rather than strata, what may also be there is both some restrictive covenants as well as statutory building schemes. And those aren't registered by the district or as part of the subdivision approval, they're registered by the developer. And so those are more around the character and keeping the values up as part of marketing a subdivision. And sort of one of the examples that we get into sometimes is I've seen building schemes where it's the materials you use are going to be of a certain quality or minimum house size, or you can't put a clothesline out on your property because there goes the neighborhood. Those sorts of things are really not the typical things a municipality would be looking for, but a developer might put it on. So it's not a strata subdivision, so it may be a building scheme you're thinking of.
Yes, it is, and yes, so that all makes sense. I confused the nomenclature. It's a scheme. So this is different in the sense that the setback is established through a covenant rather than something that is restricted to what the developer says.
Yes, there's two things, and I should say that there's a covenant area, which is like a setback, which is, now that's like a contract registered on title. So that restrictive covenant is, the district is named in that. It's a condition of the subdivision. There's also the zoning, which puts a setback on the property. And the zoning is a bylaw adopted by council. So this building would be encroaching in both. They overlap each other. So that's where, if council supports this going forward, we would need to deal with really approval of two pieces of the same thing for this building. And one would be agreeing to modify the covenant. The other would be issuing a variance for the setback for the zoning. I hope I haven't further confused things there.
No, you've clarified them. Thank you.
Would this not set a precedent so that the neighbors might want to do something similar?
It might be perceived as that, and that's one of the concerns that we would raise, is that if the covenant was placed there for a purpose with an intent, going back to the master development agreement that was agreed to with the original zoning of the land with Weyerhaeuser, and setting greater setbacks or separation between properties and keeping sort of the natural character of it, that was sort of the intent behind it. So is it a legal precedent where council therefore has to agree to the next one? No, each of those decisions really are handled on an individual basis by council at the time. You can agree to one and not have to agree to the next, but it may set that expectation or perception of there being a precedent, and that's one of why we raise it as a question or concern.
Thank you. Councillor Kennington?
Through the mayor, an allowable use of this covenant is for a driveway, correct?
Yes, it's one of the exceptions of allowing a driveway. One of the few, it would be essentially the leaving it in its natural state, or allowing a driveway to access the non-green space area, or what is commonly referred to as the building envelope.
So is there sort of a spatial restriction of what you can call a driveway? Because, I mean, technically, I guess you could make the driveway go all the way along the back and completely destroy the green space and then load it up with aux boxes if this became a precedent.
Through the mayor, the placement of the buildings are specifically prohibited. So I think the interpretation of the need to access your property, and so the driveway needs to sort of cut through the setback area to get into the building envelope. In the past has been quite broadly, and I think interpreted. If we had an application for someone with a building permit who wished to build a ring road of a driveway around the edges of their property, we'd struggle with that. I would argue that does not fly with the covenant, and the covenant would have to be modified. Council would have to agree to that in order to build that driveway. It could also be interpreted more narrowly to just be crossing through the green space area to get into the building envelope. So,
thank you.
Would the applicant like to address council? Is the applicant in the room? Is the applicant on Zoom, Mr. Rotenberg?
I do see the applicant on Zoom, and he has raised his hand, so I'm just going to allow him to talk at this point. Ben Aston, you're unmuted.
Great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you, Council, for your consideration on this. By way of brief introduction, I'm Ben Aston, and I would like to put this Oxbox, this office, just off the driveway. I appreciate some of the thoughts that have been shared by Bruce in terms of the objections to this, namely, that there's a covenant there, there's a green space buffer is designed as part of this. However, I would just like to draw your attention to the fact that because of the driveway, which already exists in the location where we're proposing that Oxbox is situated, the green space really doesn't exist between the properties anyway. And so I don't know if you can take a look in your notes at page 47 and 48, where you can see the proposed location for this. You can see actually there is no green space buffer as a result of the driveway between our property and the neighbour's property. So I understand the intent of this covenant is to retain the green space, but it doesn't exist. And where we're proposing we put the Oxbox is in between two trees at the end of the driveway. So the suggestion that it will impact the green space, I would contest that. I'd also suggest that, supposing that we can't, and this is rejected, supposing we can't do this, put it in this location, the impact of that will be that we relocate it elsewhere on the property, which, okay, is fine, but the whole point of the covenant is to maintain the green space, and by putting it elsewhere on the property, it will require us to remove even more trees to create space to put it elsewhere within the building envelope. So in light of the fact that it doesn't really impact the green space, obviously the driveway has previously been approved, which was allowed as part of the exceptions to this covenant, and in light of the benefits to the environmental impacts by the fact that by positioning it here we remove less trees, and also, I don't know if you can see in the picture, that the relative proximity of the neighbour's property to the property line, there are buildings in the vicinity anyway, and I think one of the ideas around the covenant is it's to maintain a certain look and feel of the neighbourhood. And I think if you go down Lawn White and you can see to what extent this covenant has been neglected to be enforced, I think you'll see that this is something that the visual that I've mocked up here of the Oxbox being situated on the driveway is in keeping with the character of the neighbourhood. So I think there's environmental benefits to allowing this to proceed as is, as well as maintaining the green space, as well as keeping it in the nature of the neighbourhood as the whole point of the covenants that were created. So yeah, I would appreciate it if you approve the suggested motion, that be approved. Thank you for your time.
Will you take questions from council?
Sure.
Any questions for Mr. Aston?
I've got
Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, through the mayor. This sort of neither here nor there, but I'm just trying to anticipate. I'm trying to look at it from all sides, and I'm wondering if you've had any feedback from your neighbor on that side, whether they would support or object to the situation of this structure.
Yeah, we're good friends with our neighbours, and I've talked over at length with them, so that's why I'm confident in the situation of a public hearing that they would not oppose it.
Thank you.
No other questions for Mr. Aston?
One for Bruce.
Oh, Councillor Hoare.
I'm not sure it's a question for Mr. Ashton, but so the issue is less where it's situated, but if we allow this, then the covenant has a precedent to break into that green space, which, I mean, I understand that it's not been perhaps adhered to as well as it should have been. But it's the concern about a precedent, I think, that I've got a bit of an issue with myself. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment.
But I thought Bruce mentioned that this, in fact, doesn't set a precedent, and each, in the case that someone should apply again in future for a building permit, and in exactly the same situation as I found myself in, that it wasn't duly approved, they would have to get similarly approval on a case-by-case basis.
Right. Okay, still contemplating. Sorry.
I have a comment.
Thanks, Councillor Hoare. Councillor Kennington?
Through the mayor. If we allow this to happen in the covenant, and one of the reasons why we should accept this is that you wouldn't cut down trees in the rest of your property. There's nothing in place to prevent you from, once it's approved, from cutting down trees in those places and putting yet another one, or even a 10 by 10 that would not need a permit. So there's not really any protections on the land after the fact, and that's just something to consider and have a concern
Right.
about.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Good point, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I see there is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make a motion? Anyone?
Can we just need a minute?
Okay.
Want to see all the options here. I have a question. Just to confirm, if it was approved, it would still have to go to a public hearing. Sorry, through the mayor.
Through the mayor. Not a public hearing, it's not a zoning amendment, but
Okay.
it would, because there's two pieces of it. One's the covenant modification, the other is development variance permit would be required, and there is notification that is required for that. So it's similar, but a little different than a public hearing. So we would provide that notification so that if people in the area feel they're affected and want to comment to council in writing or in person, then when it comes back to council for decision, then there'd be a process, a moment of receiving those comments, again, either verbally or written comments from the neighborhood.
Thank you.
So we have an option A and an option B. Anyone want to put one forward?
I'll make a motion here to further the discussion that council direct staff to prepare an amendment to the Green Space Covenant FB 154853 as requested, and give public notice for development variance permit 22-06 to reduce the side yard setback requirements for an accessory building at 2010 Sinnamaka Road.
Do I have a seconder? We need a seconder for discussion. Councillor Hoare, thank you. Further discussion? We're a quiet group tonight, boy.
I'm not crazy about the idea. I mean, I've been in a similar situation myself, and speaking from my own experience, I think the reality is that when you buy a piece of property, every effort is made to make you well aware of what the restrictions are, what the covenants are, what the boundaries are, what the borders are. And the reality is that, it's easy to understand how people often come into conflict between the notion that, well, this is my land and this is what I want to do with it, versus, well, this is what you already agreed to before you made that purchase. Having said that, I mean, I can understand the logic of saying, well, I want to put a small structure at the end of a driveway that's already there. The main objection that I think I would give weight to is if the immediate neighbor said, well, no, this is going to, affect our ability to enjoy our property. So I see both sides of it here. And I guess I'd look to someone else to sway me one way or another.
Any further comments? Councillor Anderson?
I'm torn as well. I know exactly what you're saying. I think the office. It makes sense to put there. I see that, but I have to be swayed over to the side of caveat emptor. And when you bought the property, the covenant was the covenant, and those are the rules that we abide by when we purchase the property. So I have to sway it to that side myself.
I guess we could call the vote and see what happens. So the option B has been.
For me, just Councillor Hoare had her hand up.
Oh, was that your hand up, Councillor Hoare?
Yeah, it was. I agree with Councillor Alexander. This, you know the rules when you buy the property. But I can see putting the office, the aux box, in a place where you're not going to have to take down trees to do it. And I'm all about preserving the trees. This is a tricky one. Just saying. But I am a bit of a rule stickler myself, generally.
And the applicant has indicated that there are other places that this office could go. It doesn't have to go there or not be anywhere at all. So he does have some options. Just saying. So if there's no other comments, we can call the vote on option B. Those in favor? And those opposed? And option B does not carry. Could I have a motion for option A?
I'll make the motion.
Councillor Anderson?
I'd like to put forth a motion that council indicate to the applicant that modifying the green space covenant on the property at 2010 Cinnamoka Road would not align with community interests, and suggest the applicant pursue the desired building construction within the zoning setbacks and existing covenanted building envelope.
Seconder?
Second.
Councillor Kennington? Any further discussion? Those in favor? None opposed, so that carries. Thank you. Good discussion. And that was a tough one.
Just so you know, Mayor, Mr. Aston has his hand up at this point.
Can we take comments after a motion has been made?
It certainly is the mayor's meeting. It's not best practice.
Okay, we'll wait. I'm sure we haven't heard the last of Mr. Aston, so we'll wait to see what he comes up with. Thank you.
Does that mean I'm allowed to speak?
No, we're moving on to our next item. Thank you. The next report is item 7.2, Development Variance Permit for 1425 Helen Road. This report will also be presented by the Director of Community Planning. And after Mr. Gregg presents, the applicant will have an opportunity to address council. Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. Through the mayor. This is a development variance permit that's being requested for the property at 1425 Helen Road, which, as you can see on the map on the screen, is really a property that spans between Helen Road and Imperial Lane near the corner of Otter Street. The request is to vary the off-street parking requirements for a proposed bed and breakfast accessory use. That there is a single-family home on the property, and they're renovating, adding some bedrooms, and would wish to essentially get a business license and move into the bed and breakfast accessory use. The property is zoned R1 single-family residential. Our zoning bylaw requires, the minimum off-street parking requirement is 2 spaces for the house, if you will, the main house, the main dwelling, which exists off the rear of the property or front, depending on which street you can consider frontage for this. So on the aerial, you can see the existing driveways off of Imperial Lane, so there's space for 2 parking spaces for the home there. And they're requesting a variance for the requirement to add essentially for two-bedroom B&B would require 2 more parking spaces, and so the request is to vary the parking requirement on their property to allow the B&B to essentially operate and presumably would be using public parking on the road instead. I think that is sort of the application in a nutshell. If the application were to proceed, as noted in the report, council has some concerns that it may add additional pressure on public parking in the neighborhood. It also could result in an increase in the number of other variances that would be sought for the parking requirements, particularly for bed and breakfast uses in residential neighborhoods. And also noted in the report that Helen Road is eventually shown in the OCP in the long-range plan to be one of the routes that should be upgraded for pedestrian pathway or sidewalk. Which side of the road that would land on, that is all future, not funded, not designed, but it is one of the considerations when, looking at what is sort of the future use and the load of parking on and use of the public boulevard. There would be some options that they obviously either off of Imperial Lane or Helen Road, potentially they could construct parking. It would likely require retaining walls on either side and some works, and that may impact, particularly off the uphill side, off the Helen Road side, may impact the amount of public parking if there were a driveway entrance going in there. So it's a bit of a weighing of those options. And again, council, I think, should also hear from the applicant before deciding on a course of action for this application. But at that point, I'd just see if there's any questions for staff.
Questions from council? Councillor Anderson?
Is there anyone else on that road that has a variance for parking?
Yes, the staff report notes that there was a few years ago a variance that was granted. I don't know if you can see my cursor. It's just this little arrow in the upper left-hand corner. It's roughly in there that there was an application. I want to say it was within the last 4 years, maybe 3-4 years ago, for I think it's a single room bed and breakfast use on that property. And some of the discussion there was very similar, where they could have built another driveway space for that use. It would have meant taking some mature trees out of the front yard, and so there was this discussion of sort of what's the pros and cons and the net benefit or impact on the community. And that time, council granted the variance to allow them to essentially continue to use the street. And so, but that's noted in the report. Since then, there's also been an increase in the B&B use as an accessory use within residential neighborhoods. So that should sort of all be balanced in what's today's context.
Any other questions? I have one. There appears to be a big paved area in front of the property. Can they not use some of that paved area for parking?
So, through the mayor, yes, that area that's sort of highlighted in red on the aerial on the screen there is largely paved. There was some ambitious asphalt work that was done at some point in the past there, where that's public boulevard but has been paved. It's on the shoulder of the road. And currently it's well used as parking on the public road. However, for it to serve the B&B and count towards their bed and breakfast so they could obtain a business license, they would need to vary the on-site requirement. And then presumably their guests would be some of the folks who would be then parking on the road there. Otherwise, it could be anyone in the neighborhood or their guests or businesses or wherever. It's essentially shared public parking at this point.
So when you say they have to vary the public, the parking, that's something done through your office?
The variance, this application is for the development variance permit. So essentially to reduce if they add the B&B use, they would need 4 parking spaces on site. They only have 2 currently physically on the property. So the variance would be to reduce that requirement from 4 spaces to 2. If that were the direction, if council gave notification and ultimately they obtained that variance, they could then apply for the business license. So that's sort of the process.
Any other questions? Councillor Hoare?
I just noticed in the applicant's, in the application of the applicant they've drawn the parking in that large red highlighted on the screen currently space as being angle parking and six spaces. But I have never seen anybody parking other than the way the person in that red highlighted space on the screen is. Everybody uses it as parallel parking, not as angle parking, so you don't get the maximum parking there. I've just got to say that I think it's the thin edge of the wedge if we have a whole lot of variances for parking for B&Bs. And we all know that there's a really big wedge for B&Bs in our town.
Thank you, Councillor Hoare. Councillor Anderson?
I would say that this is another really tough one for me, just on the just like the last one in some ways, because you're just looking at it at face value, you're like, oh, there's quite a bit of parking here. This makes sense. But again, going back to where we want to go, rule-wise, and potentially developing Helen Road as a walkway. This is a really difficult one for me, because it seems to make sense. There's quite a bit of space there, but I'd welcome to hear the resident speak about it. But I think that one of the saving graces here is that the option is there is that large area in the front to potentially to build a driveway as well. But I mean, it is one of those ones where you see that space in the front, but again, it was paved public, so. Yeah, I don't know. It's a really tough one for me.
Councillor Cunnington?
It's not so tough for me. I'm generally a fan of B&Bs. I used to run one, but I had to adhere to the rules, and that meant using up my whole yard for parking, which wasn't that great, but I did it. And I think there is already a lot of animosity between the general public and B&B owners, and I can just see this exacerbating it. One of the reasons we had the stricter rules come into place is because of things like this, where people were kind of running amok. It's the Wild West. And I think if we don't want further restrictions on B&Bs, we need to rein it in and follow the rules. And if it is possible to get that parking on their property, as many others have, then I think that needs to be pursued. That's just my comment.
I think as part of the report, the applicant has described what it would take to create those extra 2 spots, which would mean taking trees out, etc. It's very similar to the last report we just dealt with. Mr. Gregg, is it possible for them just to use Fraser Lane for the extra, just as public parking for their B&B guests?
Sorry, through the mayor, just to clarify, Imperial Lane?
Imperial Lane, sorry.
There isn't width to park on Imperial Lane physically. There are some of the properties on the water side of Imperial Lane have some sort of wider areas. They built some pretty substantial retaining walls in there to have that width. It's a very narrow lane, so I wouldn't suggest that just parking on the lane would fly.
Okay, perhaps we could hear from the applicant. Is the applicant in the room? Okay. Just go to the mic and state your name and address, please.
Hello, my name is Marie-Hélène Tremblay. I'm on 1425 Helen. Basically, when we bought this house, the realtor was telling us that it was our parking. Not the realtor that represent us, but the other realtor, that it was all our parking, and it's what was really in our mathematics of all we can make happen with that really high mortgage, all to make our payment. It was making sense, and we were we have so much parking in the front and in the back. Yeah. Now that we know it's not ours, it was to us it was believable with the pavement and the return wall that it was ours.
Yeah, we definitely had a few points in learning on the fly as this meeting's going. Not all of them make sense, but I'll just I'm Brock Crofton, by the way, also owner of the property. One, as of us living there, we have never parallel parked there once. It's always been 45 degrees, so it's been quite obvious that there's several spots there. Two, I just like to state further that if we do have to put in that parking spot, that we will lose street parking there. More street parking than if we add 2 spots, we'll probably lose 3 street parking spots, I would say. And then just the precedence that's already been set by the neighboring property, I'd like to point that out as well.
Of 1465 LN that got their variance, and they have like they need 3 parking, I guess, and they don't even have like 1 parallel parking at front of their house, what we kind of do and not obstructing the other neighbors. And I understand that like if there's like a pathway, like a walkway, it's possible it will be on our side, and if it's on our side, we can park parallel, still 2 car easy there. Like it is a lot of space. Like I don't think like the walkway will be like, I don't know, like 15 foot large, I believe, but who knows. And it will be really hard to do the walkway on that side, because you will have to do a bunch of like return wall on everyone's property beside us. So, and there's also parking streets parking on the other side of the street as well.
I think what she's saying is we suspect that the sidewalk would go on the other side of the street. Most likely it would be the easiest way to go, is what she's stating.
Any questions for the applicant from council?
Yeah, through the mayor. You do have some parking off of Otter Lane. Is that like a carport or a garage or something?
On the Imperial, we have a carport and another, yeah.
And how many spaces is that? How many cars can you park there? 2. And so you need 5 spaces. And how many B&B suites?
No, we need 4 in total.
4 in total.
2.
So you're looking for 2 more spaces.
Correct.
And it's not clear from the images. Is there's a retaining wall along the edge of that red
Yes.
blob? How high is that retaining wall?
Approximately 2.5 feet.
3, 4.
Maybe 3.
Is that the reason that you don't want to use part of the lawn? Because that's, one day with a backhoe or their services. Is why? What's preventing you from putting 2 straight-in spots?
We'll have to do like another returner wall, expand, remove like what is like the fence that's already there. Probably build a bigger fence for like the triplex, because we will be at the same height than the fence on that side. If we put it on the other side, we have to remove a tree. The water from that parking will possibly go straight to the other house that's like built straight on the property line. So that could be a problem on that side.
Sorry, it's not. I probably should have gone to the site. Is the house or is the lawn lower than Helen, or is it higher?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a drop off into the lawn.
And on Imperial, it's like also returner wall because it's higher.
Right, so you're like built in the middle of a slope.
Yes.
Councillor Hoare, anything from you? Councillor Mafty?
I have one quick question through the mayor. The package of information that I was presented with here says that the owners, presumably you, were made aware of the requirements and limitations at the time that you first applied. And so I'm wondering what your perspective on that is. Was the hope that, this was like a surmountable, challenge based on information you had from the realtor or whatever? Like, I understand that at one point you believed that to be your parking, but at what point did you realize that it wasn't in the process here?
In the middle of the process, when
the Airbnb process of having the Airbnb put through.
Okay, and one sort of follow-up question that I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I just want to be clear. I understand that the realtor told you that the parking was yours, but have you been able to, is there any reason to believe that you were like misinformed or deceived in terms of the papers that you would have signed when you purchased the property that would have had property lines and all of that? Like I know realtors say lots of things, but that's why there's a disclosure when you purchase a property. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but like, did you just not do your due diligence and you just sort of believe the realtor, or was there mistaken information that you were presented with?
There is no false information. Just I believe he used the words as grandfathered or somewhere along those lines. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
I think Bruce said it best when he said it looked like there was creative asphalting at one point there, and it looks like you've got a really, like, you know, more than ample driveway in there, but it's public land, and as last time, this type of thing breaks my heart, because I can see how this, you know, you buy something and you see what it is, someone tells you what it is, and then when you go to go through the proper channels, you realize that it's difficult. I mean, I can't deny the previous one and then allow another one, but at the same time, I feel like it is difficult because there has been a variance further down the road. This one is really, really tough for me, but again, I went and looked at the property this morning, and I got a little tour, so it was nice to see that. I think there is the possibility of parking there. It won't be cheap. There'll be some construction involved. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't have a direct answer on this one. I'm really in the middle.
I think the applicant didn't really care about parking until they went through the B&B process of applying to build a B&B, and that's when they were informed that they now need 4 parking spots, is how I'm understanding it.
To some extent, but when we bought the property, because of the zoning at the time, our understanding, our financial setup was towards that being our parking. So, yeah, it was our understanding from the very beginning that was our parking, not just. Then it wasn't a concern because we assumed we had a ton of parking to go ahead with the rules of the Airbnbs.
Okay.
Basically, we can also make the Airbnb parking in the back in Imperial, AZ, and just keep doing what we're doing and parking there. That's just what we asked, to just keep going with what we're doing already.
So that would still require this variance permit, correct, Mr. Gregg? Yes. Okay. Councillor Kennington?
I'd like to ask a question to Bruce.
Sure.
Is that out of turn? Okay. Through the mayor, is there any mechanism to do a temporary use permit for parking here to give them time to make some money from the B&B and then construct more permanent parking later using that retaining wall? Or blowing out the retaining wall and filling it?
Through the mayor, good question. Temporary use permit may not be the tool, because that's really about allowing a use that's not otherwise permitted, and the use is a permitted accessory use.
Right.
A variance with a time limit, I think, is what you're looking for. Is that possible? Maybe. I'm thinking through what the mechanism would be. It might be a variance based on an agreement to have, say, okay, you have a license allowing you to meet 2 of your parking spaces on, for the home owners on the public road right of way for a period of time, and have that agreement time out, in which case they wouldn't be able to, let's say, for 3 years, like a temporary use permit. If that license were to allow them to basically put their personal parking, their minimum 2 spaces on the road, and then when that agreement timed out, they would then go to renew their business license on the B&B and have to deal with the parking at that time, either with a variance or with building it on site. So it may be, rather than varying it, would be if council wanted to do that sort of time limited, it would be through like a license of occupation to allow that parking to be met on the street. Sorry, I'm sort of thinking out loud.
No,
Just
I get that.
figuring
I'm
out
just, when you talk about, you know, the OCP and the plan for sidewalks and what, it would be a shame to sort of throw roadblocks in front of ourselves going forward if the plan comes up and no, the sidewalk actually does work better on that side. And we've already, you know, kind of blocked it off and we no longer have that use. I assume that sidewalk's not going in the next 3 years. So potentially there's a win-win here.
It's not in the budget of the 5-year financial plan.
That's a great point. So the suggested motion would be B, but with a time limit?
And I may need some help on this. You've raised a creative solution that through the mayor, it wouldn't therefore be a variance. It would be council directing staff to prepare a license of occupation for a time limit.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think if council is desirous of exploring an alternative option like a license of occupation, it might be in the best interest for council to direct staff to go and investigate options for a license of occupation and provide a follow-up report with the implications of doing something such as that. It would be definitely creative. A word of caution is once a license of occupation is like a temporary use permit, it does kind of set the anticipation for future councils to just keep on renewing it. So there is a little bit of caution that should be considered when considering a temporary permit for something like that, because at the end of the day, the request can be, oh, well, you've provided this temporary use or license of occupation, can you just renew it? And then it's like, oh, okay, it's considered, it gets rolled over, and then it gets rolled over, and then it becomes permanent. So I'm not saying that it's not, we can investigate it, bring something back to council with the pros and cons and really give it some good consideration before enacting something of this nature.
Thank you. I really like this idea. Thank you for the idea, Councillor Kennington. I know this young couple has spent a lot of money on this property and probably don't have it in their budget to do this huge renovation that they would need to do to get the 2 parking spots in. So Mr. Rotenberg is probably writing up a possible motion for us at the moment. Councillor Hoare, any comments from you?
I actually quite like the idea as well of finding a way to, let them, I want to say, sock a little money away to be able to do the work that needs to be done. I don't like the idea of having a permanent variance. So if there's an option, I am not against that.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Mafty?
I guess while we're waiting, I'll just listen to the sound of my own voice. This is for me, I've noticed, being new on council, there's every issue basically boils down to like, well, what's for the good of the individual? What's for the good of the community? I'm not categorically opposed to a creative solution like this. I do see a big problem, however, with the fact that all the information, all the conversations that I've had indicate that one of the problems in our community are short-term rentals. And I don't think that it's the district's task. I don't think it's mayor and council's task to bend over backwards to figure out ways to facilitate short-term rentals. I understand the frustration you guys must feel with the information that you received. I completely believe you, and I empathize with that frustration. But again, just as with the gentleman before, it's like, as you said, caveat emptor. And in this case, I there are two specific things that I would struggle with. One is you've approached us and said, well, we're requesting that you consider this because it's already been given to somebody else. And it's like, well, that's going to make it twice as tempting for the next person to come and say, well, geez, half the streets on the, half the houses on the street have been granted this variance. And I also have an issue with the fact that, as a specific example, we're basically allocating, town resources, community resources to make it easy for someone to run a short-term rental. That I feel like there are enough mechanisms in place to allow legal, conforming, by the book short-term rentals that follow the rules to operate, that it shouldn't be up to us to kind of do the legwork to figure workarounds to get more short-term rentals in the community. So as it sits, I wouldn't support this, but if there is a creative solution that works for you guys, that works for everyone, I'd love to hear it. But
I'd just like to comment on that. B&B as a secondary use is in our bylaw, and our job is to kind of, hear the public. If we weren't here to sort of come up with creative solutions, why are we even here if it was just cut and dried what the rules are? So we have to work with the existing bylaws and do what we can to help the community. That's kind of what I'm thinking. No, I don't want to just give it to them. I really don't. But at the same time, I've been in that position. I think, a lot of people have at some point in their life got duped, and it's scary. And I'm still saying that they need to do the right thing. Just give them the time to do it, because the alternative it can be really scary and stressful. And we're not here to stress people out. We're here to help people follow the rules and get what they need as a community member. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Kennington. And I believe they were grandfathered in to have their B&B because it was in process before we passed those bylaws. So, yeah. Mr. Rotenberg?
In the pause, I'll just say we're bringing you all the really easy ones this evening.
Oh my God.
Will you ask Councillor Horse and see what you guys can see?
Councillor Hoare, can you see the screen with the motion?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Rotenberg.
One note on this resolution, I haven't specifically mentioned license of occupation. The thinking here is maybe there's an alternative method that we can identify in the report back to council.
Okay, would someone like to make that motion? Councillor Anderson?
I would motion that council direct staff to investigate using an alternative method to temporarily permit on-street parking spaces for the B&B use at 1425 Helen Road and report back to council.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
And it passes.
Was that an opposition or was that? Okay. I thought there was a lag.
Okay, hopefully this will be a win-win for everybody, for you guys. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The third report should be a little easier. Item 7.3, Highway 4 Junction Landscaping. This report will be presented by our CAO, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before council is a report with respect to the junction at Highway 4 and the Tofino-Ucluelet Peninsula Highway. The previous council had been advocating for a beautification project to occur at that junction. Currently, it's concrete, asphalt, not exactly the most welcoming viewpoint as you drive into the West Coast Peninsula area. MODI, the Ministry of Transportation, it's their responsibility for maintaining that area. They contacted us in last year, indicating that they were starting to look at that area for doing a realignment and safety improvements. And then in January, they reached out to staff and indicated that they had a little bit of extra money in their budgets. They want to do a project starting February 1st to redo the North Island, so that triangle heading towards the Tofino. The Ministry of Transportation does not generally undertake any beautification projects. They look for simple solutions. They're looking at highway safety, and that's about it. So they reached out to us as an organization that has indicated that we're interested in saying, hey, we're invested in this. It's the entrance to Ucluelet. It's the first point onto the peninsula. We've been advocating for beautification. So their communications to the district was that if you want it beautified, that's fine. They will undertake the works around what they would normally do, but we'd have to enter into a license of occupation or some sort of maintenance agreement to maintain it. In addition, they said that they'll do the forming, so the concrete work, curbing. They're going to put in a pedestrian access point, so they'll eventually connect the north side of Highway 4 with the south side of Highway 4 to allow pedestrian access to the businesses towards Ucluelet. But they would fill it with dirt, but they wouldn't plant it. So if we want it, we got to plant it, and then we have to look after it. So staff did a very quick review of the options and availability of what it would cost, how big is this area, and we were sadly we're saying that it's actually quite expensive. We're looking at about a 7,000 square foot area between, or sorry, a 5,000 and a 7,000 square foot area, so quite large, with reductions for the pedestrian walkways in the middle. It would cost an estimated, based on one plant per square foot to plant it, about $25,000 or $20,000 to $25,000 per island. There is an option for us to consider this, utilizing potentially the Resort Municipality Initiative funding. So that's funds that come out of the hotel tax, if you will, that are not tax dollars. But it's a big ask to do something that's not within the municipal boundaries. And then we'd have to look after it. We have talked to our parks team about this, and they did the initial estimate of what the planting costs and time would take. And they definitely have concerns about ongoing watering. There's no water out there, so they'd have to truck water, make sure that the plants survive in the first year, then hopefully they're rooted and self-sustaining. We would pick plants that were most apt for this area. But it is a median area, so it gets lots of sand and oil and fumes. It's not the most hospitable area. So we'd probably have to replace plants over time just to upkeep it. The upkeep we estimate at about, once established, about 12 hours or so a year. We'd go out there a couple of times a year, make sure that it looks good, repair anything that we need to. So ongoing maintenance wouldn't be too bad, but an initial investment is substantial. And it's not something that we've considered. The last piece of this is that it's now or never. So if we if the district is not interested in it, then MODI will return it to an asphalt or concrete form. That'll be there for the next 50 to 70 years because they just don't replace them very often. So we have a one-time opportunity to consider doing this. The first one would happen in between February and March, and then we'd probably plant it in the spring, say April, May. The second island will be done in the future, and the Ministry of Transportation said that they're going to be doing some realignment to improve safety aspects on that one, so there's a little bit more work, and they have not presented a design or what that would look like. So if council were to entertain this, we would need to request a reallocation of funds from the Resort Municipality Initiative towards this project. It is a beautification one that is solely centered around the entranceway, so we feel that it would be a good fit for tourism. We would need to allocate staff time to the planting and purchasing of the plants. And then in the future, when the ministry decides to do the second island, presumably in 2023 as well, we would have to undertake the planting as appropriate. Happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Any questions from council? Councillor Kennington?
Through the mayor, does Tofino have any involvement in this? Because I know I keep asking that question, but I've heard it many times that people think Tofino starts at the junction, and they own all the parks and everything in between the junction and Tofino. And I've actually heard people in the coffee shop in Ucluelet saying, "Oh, I'm in Tofino," right? So, I just wonder the bang for the buck. Is it really going to benefit us as opposed to putting that money into really making the entry sign pop or some other initiative to really direct the focus towards our town? Because I think it's just going to be white noise when you come through those mountains and through the forest, and then there's a couple of little plants there. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's justified the expense and the maintenance for such a small impact.
Yes, a great question, and I can actually answer that one. The ministry did reach out to Tofino, and Tofino said, no. So they're not interested. It's too far away from their community. It's like that's 30 odd kilometers away. Can we allocate those RMI funds to alternate projects that are a higher priority? Absolutely.
I guess I'm speaking on behalf of the previous council because we really wanted something really great happening out at that junction. And I think the fact that we own the property where the Pacific Rim Visitor Center is should sort of speak to this a little bit because it's right adjacent to the Visitor Center and we own that property. Councillor Hoare?
I'm just wondering, it is a lot of money for a little space and it's hard to do that upkeep without water access out there. Do those islands have to be low profile? Could you use, I don't know, some of the nice rock? We have a lot of rock, like the black rock from down near Black Rock or somewhere. Could we do some sort of artistic kind of island space, but using things that are not going to be as expensive to maintain and tricky to maintain without water? Just a thought.
Through the mayor, yes, it would take landscape planning to design that and figure out what that might look like. So there's lots of things that you can do with that island space, especially with the significant area that it is. All of it would cost an allocation of funds, placing of rocks, and then designing that as entranceway. You do have to take into consideration the visual lines for traffic and the safety parameters, so you can't obstruct views. But I'm reminded of the structure that was built out in Radium, the big huge horns that a big sculpture there that's like, I don't know, 20 meter or 10 meters tall. So there's definitely things that you can do, but it takes time and development and planning to do it. Right now, we could go back to Modi and say, yes, we're interested, but you can't lay this on us in 2 months, and see what they say. But their plan is to expend those resources to redo that median and get it done by March 31st is what we've been indicated. So we can advocate for it, but there's no guarantee that we'd be successful.
I have further comment.
Any other comments?
Through the mayor. As much as beautification would be a benefit, the lack of maintenance could actually have the opposite effect, and median planting is challenged at the best of times, and so you've got lots of idling traffic. Occasionally, we get the gravel and whatever from the snow. Median planting is extremely challenging, and yeah, we don't have water, so I don't understand how we could actually make that stay beautiful and that it wouldn't be, look at that dead plant there. It's so yucky, So we just have to make sure if we're going to do it that we're going to do it. And I'm constantly on about maintenance, and can we afford to keep asking for unicorns and not maintaining them?
Councillor Anderson?
Wow. You could plant it with cannabis. You could kill two birds with one stone on that one.
Dispensary at the visitor center. That would be great.
Cool. That's right. I think it's a great idea to have the beautification out there and of the plants. There's when you're driving through California, you see small towns and they have these beautiful, as you're driving in and it is really nice. But you know more about this than I do as far as the maintenance going on with the median planter, and if it is challenging, I wonder. I'm also making eye contact with Miss Monteith over there, because I don't know what the funding is and if we've got other things that might be a priority. So
I'd be happy to comment on that through the mayor. Our budget is almost ready. Miss Monteith is finalizing the capital side of it. Staff have been working extremely hard to make. We've had to remove a lot from our budget to make it reasonable, and council will be presented with full picture. I don't want to get into the details of it because you need the full picture, but there's a lot there. There's a huge demand. There's a CPI, as well as the cost of living, has gone through the roof, and the associated costs of doing business have gone up significantly. Council will have seen that with all of our projects that have been reduced substantially just because the costs have skyrocketed, ballooning to sometimes double or triple the anticipated cost. So we need to make, as a community and council, it's an imperative that these things be considered in that light, and we spend the money wisely at all times. Aside from it being, although this is not direct tax dollars, it does have tax implications, for using funds from one pot to use another one. So it was a project and a desire of previous councils to increase the beautification of it. The question is it still a priority? And unfortunately for the timing of it, it's now or never. For Modi, they're going to do their work one way or the other. So it's putting a very difficult decision for an allocation of resources that could be definitely used for things in town, or beautification of the sign. There's more work that we have to do out there. So yes, there's definitely other things we could use it for.
Has Modi given us a deadline to reply to them?
They would like to start work February 1st.
I got lots of time.
I really like Councillor Hoare's idea of not using plants, using something else other than plants.
Plants are the first thing that came to mind is plant hardy grass. Yes, we could do that, and we could ask Modi for more time, saying, hey, come on, this is unreasonable. And we could, if council wishes, they could direct staff to engage with the ministry to see if there's, what can we do? Can we do a little bit more planning, use sort of zero-scape principles for the development of the islands? And absolutely, there are options out there. It would likely cost similar or more for those developments, I would guess, because even transplanting and acquiring the rocks is not cheap. So everything will come at a cost.
I just don't want to miss this opportunity, because as you said, if we say no to them, they're just going to pave it, and that's the way it's always going to be.
Correct.
I think we've lost Councillor Hoare.
Yes, that's correct. Councillor Hoare lost connection. I believe she's going to try to reconnect, but it will be a couple minutes.
Okay. So comments, Councillor Mafty?
I've always found a certain beauty in really nicely done pavement, and so I think I'd be happy with that. I don't want to be the guy that says, no, let's not make something beautiful, but, it seems to me the bottom line is we don't have a tremendous amount of money. The money that we do have could be better spent somewhere else. I see the justification, but I struggle to I struggle to imagine that this is a wise investment. It's not to say it's a horrible idea, but I don't think I would be inclined to support it.
Councillor Kennington?
Through the mayor, my first thought was the same as Jen's, with using the black rock, and then my second thought was, I believe I saw a car upside down in the middle of that median at one point, and I thought maybe one of those boulders would be a hindrance. But the other thought was, river stone. I think the issue for me is always maintenance, because we build and then we can't maintain, and it has the opposite effect. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we want to rein things in, start with the village green, and sort of slowly move out from there, instead of some over here, some over there, and really make something special in one place, and really fund it and maintain it and make it beautiful. And it doesn't matter what they've had to drive past once they get here, it's a real jewel. So I really just...
And no one's going to stop and take photos there anyway. We could improve things in town that people are actually going to appreciate, that people who live here are going to appreciate every day.
So you don't want to take the opportunity to piss Tofino off?
I don't think
No.
I don't think it'll upset them. They'll just be like, hey, free advertising or free landscaping, because the reality is the majority of people are coming out to Tofino, and when they pass that junction, they're in Tofino. Even though our big sign is right there, it's like I didn't see it.
There could be a big arrow that says Tofino, and it points towards Euclid.
I
don't know if we need that either.
So is it worth asking staff to come back to us with any other suggestions for beautification that doesn't involve plants?
If I may, Madam Mayor. From what I'm hearing is maybe the recommendation would be is for staff to request Modi to consider, a river rock, the big stones, hard surface placement, to make a modicum of effort to make it a little bit better than just asphalt or pure concrete, instead of just paving it. And we can make that request and see what they say. But we can also request more time from Modi to say, it's like, look, we're interested, but this isn't possible at this point in time. Although if it is the desire of council to focus those resources in town, I think probably the recommendation would be just to advise Modi that, please beautify it as much as you can with river rock, if you will, and see what will happen. And it'll be up to them whether or not they want to move it forward or not. Unless you want to invest resources, because there will be a cost involved in designing something like that. And coming up with a proper plan, which would need to be approved by Modi as well.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I definitely, I think it would be nice to have, and I'd like to, sort of fulfill the wishes of the previous council, but at the same time, I think during this time, it's just being fiscally responsible. It has to be what the direction that I go. It has to be, if there is a possibility that there's something that needs attention. But I like your suggestion. If just asking Modi if they could do that, if they could put the River Rock in or something like that. I'm not sure how easy that is to do.
Through the mayor, it's a phone call and an email. Right. It can be very simple. It can be an informal request. Council could also resolve to direct staff to request Modi, the Ministry of Transportation, to, use a stylized hard surface rather than concrete or something like that.
Through the mayor, conversely, if we request sort of even just gravel, something permeable, and talk about water filtration, it's cheap. It's probably cheaper than asphalt, and it gives us the opportunity to do it again later, because pulling up a little bit of gravel and some landscape fabric is going to be a lot easier than pulling up asphalt, and probably an easier ask down the line when it makes sense for us.
Just a comment to that. It wouldn't be a matter of whether or not, I don't believe it'd be a matter of whether or not it'd be a difficult ask. It would just be, if you would like to do it, by all means, go right ahead. Don't ask us for money. So, whatever's there, we would have to do 100% of the work. So, they'll prep it. They'll do whatever it is that they're planning at this point in time, which is probably mostly concrete. If we wanted to cut, remove, put planters or something like that in the future, it would be a request to Modi, and then they would advise us, by all means, here's a license of occupation, you look after it, as long as it conforms and doesn't create a safety issue. Generally speaking, I would think that they would be supportive of it.
And we would not proceed if RMI said no to us anyway, right?
Correct. Although RMI is unlikely to say no to a beautification project for the entranceway to the national park and Ucluelet and Tofino.
Especially because we own that property where the visitor center is.
Hard to say if that would factor in.
Okay. Mr. Rodenberg, are you preparing something for us?
First off, Councillor Hoare has re-entered the meeting.
Oh, good.
She's not on video. I need a little bit of clarification on where this motion's going, and I can prepare something for you. But at this point, I have that Council directs staff to request the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure consider beautifying the subject intersection medians with, or are we asking for more time? I need a little bit of direction here.
I think more time, for sure. Mr. Lawrence?
It's at the prerogative of council. What would council like staff to do? So we can request a little bit more time so that we can consider options. If council is thinking of contributing to it, then I would suggest additional time for us to consider options that are low maintenance would be appropriate. If it is the desire of council to say, no, we don't want to invest in it at this point in time, then it would be a request to Modi to install a river rock finish or like surface rather than just concrete or asphalt.
Which would be on at their cost.
Correct.
Councillor Hoare, are you with us again? Do you see her, Mr. Rotenberg?
Yes, I see her online, but she's muted. So, and she does have co-host permission. She may be having connectivity issues.
Okay, what does council think about asking Modi for more time and for them to do something a little bit more elaborate than concrete?
I mean, it can't hurt.
It can't hurt. Okay, let's go with that.
So for clarity, the direction from council at this point in time is to request Modi to undertake installation of a river rock finish or like hard surface, but and finish the motion there instead of at this time, like the District of Ucluelet is not in a position to undertake the work ourselves.
If we were to undertake the River Rock portion of it, I've done it myself. It's not much time and it's not much money. So if we just go ahead and pay for the River Rock and say, go ahead, put the curbs in, and we'll supply the landscape fabric and the River Rock and call that our landscape, and
do it in like a gravel and river rock.
Gravel and river rock, and maybe one black boulder in it, so it's obviously Ucluelet, but like keep it simple, and avoid all the maintenance costs going down the line. I think it serves both purposes.
Whew. Challenge me on our resolutions. So I'm thinking that the direction then would be that council directs staff to work with the Ministry of Transportation on the installment of a low maintenance, zero scape surfacing for the highway junction islands.
That's where I'm leaning towards, and I think that's what Jen was talking about before she cut out.
Okay, I think a follow-up resolution would be helpful for staff to get an idea of what council's appetite for an allocation of funds from the Resort Municipality Initiative would be for this type of project as well, so that we can budget for it accordingly. Because we would need to request support from the RMI initiative to reallocate existing resources or utilize what is called top-up funds from that RMI initiative that we generally see each year. So it's an additional allocation that is above and beyond the base that the municipality sees. And that could be similar to the existing resolution, just by substituting the desired amount. So the very first one, the council supported beautification project of the Highway 4 and Tofino Ucluelet Peninsula Highway Junction, provided that the project can be funded through the Resort Municipality Fund to a maximum of
$1, Bob.
Something like 5,000. Is that a good number?
Staff have not done any investigation on it, so it's a large area, so it's something that we could not weigh in on at this point in time, but we could bring something back, I guess.
I think through the mayor, if we can get a cost estimate to do what that was, and then we could hone that number in pretty quickly.
Okay.
And then whatever we figured we would need for maintenance to clean up the cigarette butts, because that's essentially what islands turn into.
So we don't need a motion at all then? We're just referring it back to staff, is that correct?
Go ahead, Joy.
I think we can do the first motion.
Yeah.
Let me present the first motion, and then see if I can make this work.
Boy, I thought this would be an easy one.
Of all the things on the agenda, this is the one that we got on flowers.
Got a taste for blood.
That can all be off-street parking for every Airbnb. It's a short walk away.
And I just want to make sure this represents what we're attempting to do.
If I may, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd make an alteration to that so that it says that council directs staff to work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure on options for an installation of a low maintenance and an option for an installation of a low maintenance xeriscape for the Highway Junction Islands and report back to council on costs.
Thank you. I don't know how to spell that word. Apparently that's how it's spelled, but no. Xeriscape. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Not a strength of mine.
So Mr. Lawrence suggested it end after islands and report back to council with costs.
Yeah.
Highway Junction Islands and report back to council with costs. Okay.
Correct. Okay, who would like to make that motion?
Oh, it would be my pleasure. I would like to move that council directs staff to work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure on options for an installation of a low-maintenance xeriscape for the Highway Junction Islands and report back to council with costs.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Kennington. Any further discussion? All those in favor? And none opposed, so that carries. Thank you.
When's the pizza get here?
Okay, 7.4 is responsible conduct policy. This report is also provided by our CAO, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before council is a request for direction on the development of a responsible conduct policy for elected officials for the District of Ucluelet. This is a new requirement legislated under the Community Charter. On Part 4, Section 113, Sub 1 and 2, it requires councils to consider the development of a responsible conduct policy and consider that adoption of a policy. If they decide not to pursue a responsible conduct policy, then there's a requirement for council to provide to the public or make available to the public the reasons why a responsible conduct policy is not required by council. The responsible conduct policy basically oversees or provides guidelines for how a council interacts with itself and the public. It covers roles and responsibilities, collection and handling of information, conflict of interest and bias, respectful workplace, bullying and harassment, social media use, interactions with the public and media, as well as gifts and personal benefits, and breaches, complaint handling, and disciplinary action. So it's quite robust set of parameters that are planned out. This is new requirement under the Community Charter. So this is the very first round for new councils that need to consider this and in legislation, so they don't have a choice anymore. Previously, this is a lot of communities have already adopted respectful conduct policies of some sort in anticipation of this legislation coming forward. Ucluelet hasn't considered it at this point in time, so this is the first time that this council and community has seen something like this. There's two recommendations or a couple of different options for developing this. Council can direct staff to develop this, and what we would do is pull from existing policies, best practices, what other communities are doing, and we would pull that information, take a look at our own bylaws, and pull together a policy for council to consider at a committee of the whole. Council would then review it, give feedback to staff, and we would make revisions as requested. The other option is for some communities they have elected to strike a committee of council or direct the mayor or authorize the mayor to develop the conduct policy on their behalf. This takes a lot more council time. Staff are generally quite involved in that process as well, working with the select committee or the mayor in some cases. The caveat is the policy needs to be developed by and considered by May 31st, or sorry, May 1st of this year. It has to be within the first 6 months of council's appointment under the legislation. So today we're looking for guidance from council in 2 ways. Do you want to consider the development of a respectful conduct policy, and would you like staff to develop it on behalf of council, or would you like to undertake that work yourself, or authorize the mayor to undertake that work on your behalf?
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Any comments from council?
Through the mayor, how new is this legislation?
It came into effect last year. It's been talked about since 2015, I believe.
Any other questions from council? I'm pretty comfortable having staff do the work for us, unless anyone has objections.
I'm uncomfortable with some of the language in that document. I read it through. We've gotten along fine without it. People are human, but when we start talking about jail time and fines for making a mistake or saying something out of turn, it's a little bit too much for myself, and probably for people who would want to run for council in the future. It's just another roadblock. So I'm not comfortable with the language that I'm seeing, and I don't know what would come back. It's a lengthy document. Those are just my thoughts on it, that I think it may lead to troubles in the future. We've gotten along fine in the past, and I don't see why we wouldn't get along in the future. If there are ways that we can resolve things, and in the language sets out a guideline but leaves things out like prison or fines, because quite frankly it's a little much. Those are just my feelings on it, my reaction to reading that document.
So you're okay with staff presenting us with something that we can look over and change and modify if need be?
Absolutely. I just, new rules, it's rules, and you get more and more focused in, and you have less and less places to go. And sometimes discussions do get heated. And to sort of handcuff people into maybe even being silent on an issue that they're passionate about could be problematic. So those are just some of the things to consider.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Mafty?
I would tend to agree. I don't object. I think in this case, between the options of whether we strike a committee or whether we direct it to staff, I'd say direct it to staff, and I think that it just behooves us all to carefully consider what we're agreeing to in terms of the final product. So I'd say yes, if staff could present us with something, then we can actually discuss what's presented.
Great point.
Good point.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I would agree with through the mayor. I would agree with both of those. Yet on reading it for the first time through, there was a bit of an odd feeling that it's a bit of a solution looking for a problem. But yeah, I agree. If you guys were to throw something together, I'd be interested to see it.
Okay, we have a recommendation. Would someone like to move that?
I'll move that council direct staff to develop a draft responsible conduct policy to be considered by council at the future committee of the whole.
And a seconder?
Second that.
Councillor Anderson? Any further discussion? I think we've lost Councillor Hoare again. All in favour? None opposed, and that carries. final report is item 7.5, CMHC Rapid Housing Initiative Grant. This report is provided by the Director of Community Planning. Welcome back, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. And I'll just share my screen again. There we go. Through the mayor, so this report is, I'll just put a little bit of context, is about a potential project, a grant opportunity on one piece of district property, an opportunity to create a type of supportive and affordable housing. There is another report on your agenda, which is an information item, and I think it's item 10.2, which is a bit of context as well that, I think goes hand in hand. Might help with some questions that might be surrounding this report, or sort of what about all the other housing things that are on the go and other potentials. So I'll just briefly overview the report and what this is about. Is just prior to minutes prior to Christmas, I want to say we caught wind of this grant opportunity, that it's the third round of what's called the Rapid Housing Initiative Grant from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and we sort of flagged it for okay, we should look into that. And so in the first week of January, we dove into understanding what this is. So essentially, this is a grant opportunity for creating affordable and supportive housing. It's really open to municipalities and essentially some nonprofits with sort of a track record of providing affordable housing and supportive housing. And as we looked into it and talked to CMHC representatives and understood what the grant was about, we started to see that this may align with some things that we've talked about, particularly as noted in the report at the back of your agenda. One option of addressing the whole myriad of housing challenges in the community is one piece of it may be building some housing. And as noted there, we're not a huge landowner as a municipality, but there are some pieces, and then even a couple of years ago we were sort of flagging, say, there's some potential parcels, and this one seemed to start to line up and start to fit. So the report really talks about a number of things that we've looked at, and as we've dug into it, it seems like, and really there may well be a project here that fits a need and makes excellent use of the site, and aligns with some of the policy that council had directed in the past. And so really this is seeking direction from council on, is this what we should be doing? Is this a very, very limited time because the grant deadline is March 15th, and part of this would be really we've looked at what they're scoring, having essentially a price, a contractor, a whole lined up. The more complete it is for, yes, we know exactly how this would be built, how it would play out, what it would cost. It is potentially funding up to 100% of construction costs, and so it's one that's probably worth going for if this aligns with council's expectations, sort of what's seen as some of the highest community need. So there's a fair bit of work to do between now and March 15th. We want to check in and make sure, and really need council's support and direction on moving in that way. The report touches briefly on what's the identified need. This type of housing, which would be, I should step back and describe it a little bit. So this parcel of land, here's what we're talking about. This parcel that's highlighted in lovely magenta colors on the corner of near the corner of Alder Street and Peninsula Road. So that's right next to the elementary school, high school, close to the community center. That is owned by the district. It's a residential property. It's currently zoned R1, and so the what's being contemplated is this is a site, because of the proximity to the schools, may really lend itself to being the sort of place where someone who's family type housing, and we sort of have spent some time testing out what kind of housing could fit there. In the past, there was some discussion, in a report that was from almost 2 years ago. We're looking at, maybe 3 or 4 townhouses. We've tested, really, this is showing 5 units in sort of duplex style, a duplex and small threeplex. could fit on the property and really have the same kind of scale as the rest of the character in terms of they're not large buildings. Some parking on site for each of the units could fit there and still have some opportunity for private outdoor space to make them very livable units. And so that's kind of was the thinking around, well, what would fit on this site? And that also aligns with the grant. It has to be for a minimum of 5 units, coincidentally, for the CMHC parameters. And we tested, well, what if could we make better use of the land? Can you get 8 units? Can you get 6? Can you do an apartment building with 20? It starts to be very constrained for that. Access, parking, and livability and the balance of it. And also getting into much more expensive types of construction where this would be essentially 14 foot wide by 43 feet deep. So it could be built as modular construction, could be stick built. There's different sort of approaches to it. So that's the sort of physically what we've been sort of testing out on site, and would need to have that kind of not final construction details in order to go for the grant, but a good idea of what are we going to be building. We need to be showing what we can achieve and sort of test how this would work. So I spoke a bit about the site. The other thing is, so this is physically it's district-owned land. If we're successful, if we were going down this path and we were successful in getting the grant and we had the funding to construct it, then it would become a municipally owned set of assets. The buildings would be owned by the municipality. But one of the things, ongoing operation of housing is always a stumbling block for small municipalities, and the vision or the need that's identified in our housing needs assessment is, and with this kind of funding where it's really being funded, where you don't have a mortgage, you're not borrowing money towards this, that kind of investment by both the municipality and higher levels of government really lends itself towards the more supportive type of housing, and that's where some of the deepest needs are. And so our housing needs assessment has identified that I think we have 70 families in the district that are within what is termed extreme core housing need. And of those, the largest group are single parents with kids. Because you can often that may be a split up of a couple, and so the earning potential of a single parent is lower. We know the median income for the municipality is, if it's 65,000 plus minus, a single parent households, the median income is about 45,000, which means half of those single parent households are basically raising their kids on less than $45,000 a year. So that aligns with this grant opportunity, potentially a site where it's next door to the schools, and the mandate of the grant is really focusing on particularly women and children and supportive housing. So these things start to line up. Now, the district is not currently in the service or in the process or in the role of providing supportive housing or being its own housing authority, that sort of thing. So we've had some conversations, and the report is a little bit high level and a little bit vague about talking to an existing community nonprofit service provider, and they have since then their board has met and so we can share. We've had some initial discussions with the West Coast Community Resources Society. The idea being that a partnership with a group like the society would be where we would essentially get this built, be the owner of the property, long-term asset, and that the society would then have a lease to operate and make sure the people who are deserving it are in that housing. And so really, with no mortgage on the property, the district, really the interest, if you're not putting potential, future municipal funding into it, is simply covering the base of maintain the assets so it doesn't degrade over time, which is quite minimal. So the details of all of that we can flesh out as we get costing on the construction and get further down the road. But that's sort of the concept that we're working forward with, and we understand that the board of the society is quite keen to keep talking and figure out how that partnership would work. And so the motions in front of council are really lined up to sort of move this potential project forward. There is a discussion of financial implications. So it would mean a commitment of the land. The land is owned by the district. We don't have a mortgage on or anything like that. It is valued at roughly $700,000. based on BC assessments. So that's something we'd be bringing to this and sort of committing the land. It's an opportunity cost. If we're committing it to this housing, then it wouldn't be used for something else. But it is in a residential neighborhood, and we'd suggest that this is a very appropriate use of it. As well, there's some, obviously to get any project shovel ready or even get to contract and grant success needs some groundwork, some survey confirming the civil works and what the servicing costs would be and that sort of stuff. The approach to, and we've included a draft RFP, request for proposals. Our intention would be to put this out very quickly. That is very much a draft. It's evolved even since we went to press with the council agenda, having talked to some builders and developers and understood some feedback on it. Really, our best bet is to keep it really focused and let them price out the building and do, even things like saying, okay, let's put a cash allowance for the landscaping as a line item for the grant and not ask the contractor to price that out at this point. We have some very good current pricing on landscape works, so I think we could easily do that. So that's sort of a lot of detail that we're sort of throwing out there. And again, the operating costs, the idea would be long-term, that really just covering that, maintain the asset, and then allow the society to, or whatever group is operating that the district agrees to operate that as part of their program, and to have an agreement on what is the affordability that's being met, the sort of target, and that let them run with providing that housing. I'm going to pause there. I think I've thrown a lot of detail out. There's, I'm sure, questions from council, and I'd be happy to discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Questions from council? Councillor Kennington.
Through the mayor. So if we have a partner, or I don't know if that's what we're calling it, but the West Coast Resources, if they manage it, that's essentially like a housing authority, so we wouldn't have to set up another housing authority to manage this?
Correct. That for example, if it were West Coast Resources Society, they are already in the operation of providing services within the community, being the whole West Coast, from shelter to the Welcome Bay facility, which is transition as people get on their feet. They're already engaged with that clientele, which really matches I think the demographic of the greatest need for housing. Often it's our understanding, and not just here, but because if you have people, say, who are in a situation where they've been in more supportive housing or transitional housing, the next step is really you need to have just some good, stable housing as you get on your feet. Longer term, there's very few affordable options in town, and so this would be those people having some direct access to it. So this project then would not have the need for us to have a separate housing authority as you would with more, employee housing or other programs.
Sounds good. And one other question. It would need a rezoning from R1 to multifamily. Would we need to go through a public hearing process on that? Or is new legislation in place to sort of fast track that kind of development?
We could hold a public hearing. Council could waive the requirement for the public hearing as well if it were desirable, if you didn't see the public benefit. I'd recommend that a public hearing it is a good part of the process potentially. That's something that we would take on and do rapidly. So.
I think this is great.
Councillor Mafti.
Through the mayor, I just have two questions. Number one, do you have any idea of the process through which these units would be allocated? Would it be like a lottery from a pool? Would it be an open lottery? What's the mechanism to fill those units?
Very early days, but I think it would be left to, if we have a partner who is providing support services to within the community, to identify who's most deserving and sort of ready and in that place of needing stable housing longer term. Because as we see this, the design of this, I haven't even talked about the design of the units, is potentially what we've shown is 3 of the units could be 2 or 3 bedroom. You could see a parent or who has kids in school. They could be there for some years as their kids go through the school system. One of the things that the advantages of this, I am going to as part of answering your question, I'm going to take advantage of the ability to sort of get into what we've sort of sketched up, just to be able to cost these
I
things
love
out.
floor plans, so I've looked over.
So,
them.
and so the idea is make sure they're all accessible. Those are the circles there, is that, you know, some of the radius and stuff. There's some variations on that. We'd want to work with whoever the partner is to make sure that we're aiming at the right demographic, but that they're modest. They're not large homes, but very livable, small front area, some private outdoor space, you know, in the rear of the units, that this lays it out so you could have a place to, you know, step outside. It may have no lawns, because, you know, we don't need it to have big lawns in a setting like this where you got a soccer field next door, which is part of the efficiency of this site and this location. Really starts to fit, you know, for the ability to make efficient use of the space, and also make it very livable for the people who are there.
Thank you. And I just had a second question. So I think you made a compelling argument for this being a good use of the land. I see noted here that one of the points to consider is that it would commit a significant portion of the current affordable housing reserve funds. And I'm wondering if you can just give us your opinion as to whether how this project lines up in terms of bang for the buck. Like, I understand that it makes sense to allocate the land and it's a really good fit. Are there any other projects that might be a better use of the money, or a better place to invest the money?
Through the mayor, excellent question. I think there are. So past council has allocated some money within the Affordable Housing Reserve, partly in support of the Lot 13 development, which is more sort of attainable housing. And we understand there may be a request for more to deal with some site issues on that property. So that, you know, currently is at the tune of around $10,000 per door for the 33 units. About $320,000 is sort of allocated. That may go up. For this type of housing, you would expect there to be more. That if, say, you know, what's suggested in the report of up to $200,000 as a cash contribution out of the fund towards this project, that's around $40,000 per door if we do 5 units there. That likely is necessary somewhere in there to have some cash contribution beyond just the land in order to succeed with the grant. That our understanding is that these are quite, you know, we're competing with municipalities all over the country, and that just coming forward with the land and saying, hey, we want to fund 100% of it, although the funding could be up to 100%, those, the federal government who's funding this, they want to see as many units built across the country as possible. So if you're bringing more in, and so they can go further with their $2 billion of funding. So I think some cash contribution is going to be necessary for it to succeed. That said, you know, there's potentially other projects as well. And one of the things, if we're on the right track with this type of project, you know, we've been sort of talking about, arguably it's worth chasing the grant, going after this. Even if we're not successful, we're much further down the road to getting it shovel ready, to have it costed out, have some design work done, and figured out what the servicing would be, because there will be other grants and other opportunities as well. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
Todd.
it does. It does. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
Councillor Mafty stole my question, actually.
Got to be quick, man.
The housing needs assessment, and I appreciate your background information that you had. The context at the bottom of the agenda was really helpful, and it was really hard to say no to that part of the housing need. For people that, you know, require supportive housing, and if it can be funded in 100% like this, it's really difficult to say no to that. So yeah, I mean, I guess, so the 200,000, that would be used though, right? I mean, that's not like a maybe or something like that. It's, even though it's funded fully.
We need direction from council. We got to start somewhere.
Right. I get it.
So if less than that, I think, and we've had some discussions of, okay, what's in the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund and what are other priorities for it? If council's comfortable with saying a little less cash contribution because we want to reserve the funds for maybe other projects, then that direction is really helpful, and we'll move forward on that basis. But again, how ultimately it scores against other municipalities, we'll only know if we apply.
Right. This number is probably the best bet for getting the grant, I guess is what you're.
If we had $500,000, it would move us up. They literally score points on what's the percentage and all the rest of it. But at $500,000, that would be about almost half of our affordable housing reserve, and we'd then start to limit some of the other projects which are already there are funds that are committed. So we're recommending that up to $200,000, sort of maybe a comfortable level that just might succeed in getting this grant.
Thank you.
I believe Donna had a point.
Ms. Monteith?
Thank you. I thought, through the mayor, I thought I would just add that we did have a very robust conversation about the contribution, but the Affordable Housing Reserve is one of the reserves that gets a regular contribution every year through our OAP, and we're getting at least $150,000, if not more, once I'm done year end. So up to 200 was a comfortable number for me because we're earning close to that just from 2022 alone. So if that helps in any way.
I love that you have your own mic. Like,
so she can drop it.
Exactly.
If I might add one more comment to that.
Yes.
Is with the budget process underway, more information will be coming forth with where those reserves are at and the full picture. So there is dedicated funding for Lot 13 that was previously approved by council that is coming out of that affordable housing fund. If Ms. Monteith corrects me if I'm wrong, but I think we have about $1 million in affordable housing at this point in time. We anticipate another ask from Lot 13 to support their initiative, which would probably bring it up anywhere. Well, we're not be a guess at this point in time. So, so we need to anticipate future expenditures from the Affordable Housing Fund, likely for that project, with an ask in the near future, possibly from Lot 13. So we don't want to allocate the 100% of those funds so that we can further additional initiatives as they present themselves. So if we deplete that fund too much, that limits what we can do later on. So that 200 is like Ms. Monteith stipulated, is like it's fairly comfortable. We will solidify that as we confirm the details of the grant application and bring everything back to council. But a general direction as the resolution is presented to council of up to 200. If council's comfortable with that, will give us a starting point.
Thank you for your comments. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, one more quick one. Are there any concerns regarding basically being a landlord on the property? I assume there would be other projects for more like affordable housing where it's an outright purchase. Are there any concerns from the district about actually managing the property and dealing with the rental side of it?
Through the mayor, excellent question. It all depends on the details, and so I think part of why we're recommending furthering discussions with a potential partner to operate the property would be a way of us being able to support this housing in town, and that the district would still own the asset, but essentially have the operation and maintenance be, could be taken part of, is basically taken care of through the program and the operation of the society. For this type of housing, that's probably the right pattern. As the report on 10.2 on your agenda, other types of housing, other types of affordable housing needs exist in the community, and so there's different, attainable housing and the, housing purchase type affordable housing projects fit different demographics and different needs, and really we'll keep showing the little graphic that's in the report of the housing spectrum of everything from shelter to free market mansions, and you need a variety of things, and sort of filling the gaps is really the challenge. So for this use and this demographic, I would argue that this is a good approach. But the long-term maintenance of the asset, and does it create a liability? We're seeing this, if we can fund it correctly or sufficiently with a CMHC grant, then it doesn't have debt on the property, which makes that asset management difficult. We probably couldn't afford to do it.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
If I may, I just added clarity to that. So it will be a district asset, so it would have to be accounted for within the municipal asset management plan, and it is still a liability. There's still insurance that we have to account for in managing that property, and there is always a risk whenever you own a property such as this. The intent is that we would enter into an agreement with a service provider that they're responsible for overseeing that, collecting rent, doing the maintenance, and the rent would pay for the ongoing maintenance and contribute possibly to a replacement plan for that asset, which the municipality is mandated to do. So that will all be wrapped up into a nice little bundle, hopefully. But we have a lot of work to do with whether it's a West Coast Resource Society or a housing authority or another organization that would fit this grant opportunity and this initiative. We would have to suss out all the details to make sure that all of those aspects are covered off. But there is always liability with owning an asset. We would have to account for that. We have to incorporate it into our asset management plan. We would have to insure it as an asset of the municipality. But because it's a rental property, and as Mr. Gregg stipulated that it's 100% paid for, there's no initial debt for this. So it would be easier to manage those costs. But again, there is always risk.
That's life, yeah. Thank you.
And I see, Mr. Gregg, in your report that staff have spoken with 2 experienced modular contractors who have expressed interest and ability to complete the project within the stipulated grant timeline.
Through the mayor, yes. And one thing I should just note is that our intent is to put out a request for proposals from contractors to come up with sort of here's a design build piece, and based on these concept plans, here's what our price would be. Keep that open till after the grant is announced, so that the intent that the successful proponent of that request for proposals, we would do that very quickly. The grant deadline is March 15th. There's a council meeting scheduled for March 14th. We're going to use every minute to the wire to bring it in front of council to say, here's what how we're going forward, and then apply for the grant. The intent is that the RFP would not say it has to be a modular contractor. That given the timelines, there's an 18-month construction window. That is one of the things. This is the Rapid Housing Initiative. They want to see it built as quickly as possible. So there's maybe some advantages. So that's why the units that are where we sort of drafted up, okay, what could fit on the site, are looking at a 14-foot wide module, because that's what you can roll down the road in a box. So we have had some of those initial conversations to see, okay, is there interest, is there capacity on the island, and some of them have experience building affordable housing. There's one is building housing that we spoke to for Cowichan Tribes. They're doing 32 units of affordable housing there right now. That was also funded under the previous intake with this CMHC grant. So we have some confidence that we're going to have some interest in this RFP.
That's great news. Thank you. If there's no other comments, I see there are 6 recommendations, and it would be appropriate to move these separately.
Okay.
Usually it's Councillor Hoare that takes on these big long ones, but she's not with us.
I'll move that council direct staff to issue a request for proposals, RFP, for a design build contractor to construct 5 supportive affordable housing units on the district-owned property at 1300 Peninsula Road. Do we want to take turns, or should I just do them all?
Don't we have to do them one by one?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
so we need a seconder.
Oh yeah, okay. I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries.
I'll move that council direct staff to prepare a draft submission to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, Rapid Housing Initiative grant intake for council authorization at its March 14th, 2023 regular meeting.
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries.
I'd like to make a motion that council authorize spending up to $25,000 from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund on preliminary survey, engineering, design, and project management in preparation of grant application, RFP, and anticipated construction contract.
I'll second it.
Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries.
I'll move that council indicate support to earmark up to $200,000 from the Municipal Affordable Housing Reserve as a municipal cash contribution to the project for consideration during the ongoing budget discussions and confirmation at the March 14th, 2023 regular council meeting.
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion?
I would just make one brief point that came up when, said, well, we'd look to council for that. I feel that I have a lot of faith in district staff. If you guys think that 200,000 is the right amount or a different amount, I mean, that's what we look to you for. So whatever is the sweet spot is the recommendation that I would look to you to make. So I'm happy with, if that number changes, I don't have any objections.
Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
I'll move that council directs staff to continue discussions with community social support service providers with the aim of developing a partnering agreement for the ongoing operation of the housing should the district succeed in obtaining project funding from the current Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC grant, or other sources.
Second.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
Bring it home.
Round robin.
I motion that council direct staff to prepare a zoning amendment bylaw to change the designation of the property at 1300 Peninsula Road from R1 single family residential to an appropriate multi-family residential zoning designation.
Second.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Whew. Awesome. Are there any notices of motion? There are 3 correspondence items. Would council like to bring any items forward for discussion? 9.1, the BC Epilepsy Society. I don't think we need to do the proclamation, but I believe that we have purple lights that we used last year for this purpose. Our CAO is agreeing, so perhaps we could just have a motion to have our purple lights light up our junction sign on March 26th for the BC Epilepsy Society.
I'll move to have purple lights installed at the junction in support of the BC Epilepsy Society.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Just to note that the Ocean Protection Plan is a hybrid meeting, February 22nd and 23rd, but I believe we have a council meeting on February 23rd, or not a council, a budget meeting, February 23rd. But just bringing that to everyone's attention. And we have 2 information items this evening.
Address the West Coast Multiplex one.
Oh, you'd like to talk about the
Oh,
multiplex?
No, but I just didn't know if it was.
Yeah, sorry, before we get on to information items, go ahead, Councillor Mafty.
I have nothing to add other than to note that we've received this lovely letter from Ms. Hackett.
Yes. Looking for support. Okay, information items. Item 10.1 is a report by the Fire Chief called Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan. Chief Geddes, welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Through the Mayor, so back in October 2021, Council provided support in the district's application to the UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Program, Fire Smart grant, and of which we were successful in applying for. So moving along in the project, the district commissioned Frontera Forest Solutions to complete the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan as part of the grant proposal. So the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan outlines strategies to reduce threat and risk by providing recommendations that will decrease the likelihood of wildfires entering the community and increase the preparedness of the community to respond to wildfires and reduce potential loss of homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure from wildfire. Several factors are considered when determining the community's wildfire risk, including the landscape surrounding the community, fuel types, fire history, and weather data. So all that data was collected and put into this very thorough document. The wildfire threat identified in Euclid's wildland-urban interface area, and so that's the area where the homes meet the trees, which, as we know, is a pretty big area in this town, and surrounding area is low to moderate. However, with the unknown impacts of climate change, coastal communities such as Euclid must prepare for unpredictable climatic events, including an increased frequency of wildfires. The Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan is intended to provide guidance to district staff and to educate and motivate Euclid community members to take part in Fire Smart. And with us today, we have a representative, Lauren Shinneman from Frontera Forest Solutions. Mr. Rotenberg, do we have her?
Yes, Lauren is on the line.
And she's going to do a short presentation and overview of the project.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me present this today. I know you guys have been in the meeting for a while, so I will try to keep it short and leave a lot of room for questions. So I put together just a really short PowerPoint that I'm gonna share with you all. It's all blurry. Hold on. I don't know why it's being all blurry here. That's odd.
Everything looks like that to me without my glasses.
Sorry about this, guys. Just try the whole screen. I don't understand what's happening. I'm really, really sorry.
Through the Mayor, I believe we can show it on our end here, Lauren.
Okay.
Mr. Rotenberg should be able to bring it up. Hopefully.
It could be an issue just with maybe my connection. I'm not sure. Okay.
Maybe I can just call a 5-minute recess, just because we've been sitting here a really long time, and that might give you a chance to figure it out. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So motion to recess for 5 minutes. And it's seconded. And all in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nope, opposed.
Oh my god. Right? That looks like something you'd get in a Happy Meal.
She looks like Dobby the house elf.
It's ridiculous. Very cute. Oh my goodness.
Drive all the way to Surrey to get her.
You just put it in like a little FedEx pack, right?
Yeah,
So
totally.
Thank you. Looks like the technical issues have been fixed, so we can proceed. Thank you.
Okay, great. Rick gave us a really good introduction on this, but I'll kind of just talk a little bit about who I am. My name is Lauren Chinnaman. I am a registered professional forester, and I am the one who led this project for the district. And I'm an associate at Frontera Forest Solutions. And so we're a company that specializes in providing wildfire resiliency and forest management services to communities across BC. We've worked all over the province with different clients, including First Nations, municipalities, provincial government, and some private landowners as well, to help with wildfire mitigation and increase resiliency in those communities. Okay, so the district contracted Frontera to complete this community wildfire resiliency plan. And so in that, we identified wildfire threats and risks to your community. And the plan is quite long, but in that plan, it outlines strategies to decrease likelihood of wildfire spread within the community, increase the preparedness of the community to respond to wildfires, and to reduce the potential damage and loss of homes and critical infrastructure in the case of a wildfire. So these plans are based on the 7 Fire Smart principles that represent different aspects of wildfire preparedness, management, response, prevention, mitigation, and resiliency. And so that is how the document is ultimately structured. So the 7 different Fire Smart principles are education, legislation and planning, development considerations, interagency cooperation, cross-training, emergency planning, and vegetation management. So to develop this plan, we did a review of existing land use plans and development plans that Ucluelet already has. We did a GIS spatial data analysis of wildfire threat, not just in Ucluelet, but also on the broader landscape. We had lots of discussions with Rick, the fire chief, and I also had an interview with a wildfire prevention officer for the coast, and that was to help identify values and risks that have wildfire concerns. Myself and another colleague, we did a visit to Ucluelet last May, so May 2022, and we collected our field data. We did a bunch of wildfire threat assessments and Fire Smart assessments on all of the critical infrastructure that was identified within the community. We also did some climate change modeling, and from all that, we identified the primary risks and provide recommendations based on all the above information and data that we collected. I know this is a little small. Hopefully you guys can see this writing. So the top risks that we determined that are for Ucluelet are, so climate modeling suggests that average summer temperatures will increase by approximately 2 degrees by 2070. And the summer precipitation is looking to remain about the same. So with that increase in temperature and the stabilization of what is currently your precipitation, that could have a pretty big impact on vegetation there. 2 degrees doesn't sound like very much, but that can really increase moisture deficits in vegetation, and you could start to see some higher fire danger days, some potential struggling of ecosystems and tree health issues. So that's really what we kind of wanted to drive home with this plan. And so next one, wildfire hazard and Fire Smart principles are not currently on the radar of most community members, and that makes sense based on the fact that it is a very wet climate that you guys experience. So it's just not as high priority as it is maybe in some other communities. We identified several interface neighborhoods, such as the Reef Point and Rainforest Drive neighborhoods, that essentially, you can kind of see on the map here, these homes are all are all surrounded by forest, and they're really nestled in there, and some of them have really long driveways that are forested all along them, and one in and out road as well, as is the case with, I believe this is Reef Point here. So if there were to be a wildfire, and we do think that likely that wildfire would likely be a human ignition wildfire, potentially from a home. Let's say Rick was mentioning that there's a lot of like cedar saunas that people have put up, or if they're just having fires, or if they're even a structure fire and it ignites the vegetation that's directly up against their home, it could spread from home to home through all of this surrounding vegetation here. Another risk is that the tourism increases a lot in the summer, and so does the population of your community. So this just ultimately increases the probability or the potential for human-caused fire ignitions. And the last is that private land, since most of the district is private land, that really restricts and limits any vegetation management that you could apply for funding for that could be done on provincial crown land. So what that does is it puts a lot of responsibility and importance on landowners to take action themselves through FireSmart and FireSmarting their homes and properties to help keep the community safe as a whole. So the report has, right at the beginning, it's an executive summary table that lists all of the recommended actions for the community to take over the next 5 or so years. This is just a screenshot. It's about, the table is usually nearly 10 pages long. There's a lot of recommendations on there. They're all split into the different FireSmart principles. And with each action, it identifies the priority, the recommended time frame, some of the resources that you can expect to be required to implement that action, a metric for success, and then notes on what's available under provincial funding, which most of the recommendations in this plan can be supported by provincial funding through the CRI, the Community Resiliency Investment Program. And so every year, UCLUELIT can apply for funding up to $100,000 to implement these recommendations. So next steps would be to determine which action items within this document the district wants to implement first. And I know Frontera's had some discussions with Rick on what we would recommend to be implemented first. And so ultimately you want to focus on the very high or the high priority rated actions. And we can also help you, Frontera can help you apply for the applicable funding through the Community Resiliency Investment Program, because it can be a little daunting sometimes. And so that's something that we do often, is help our clients to apply for that funding and get that funding every year. I just wanted to show you an example of one of the recommendations that is in the document. So this area here, the first photo, sure you can maybe recognize from the aerial view that this is the school. And so this is a forested area that's on municipal land, so district land. We can't be doing any kind of treatment on private land for obvious reasons. That's up to the private landowner. But this municipal land, the district can take action to do some light touch vegetation management in there. And it's kind of hitting two birds with one stone, because you do have a piece of critical infrastructure within that forested area. There's the water tower. And so you can apply for funding to help fire smart the water tower and do vegetation management within this identified municipal area. And the third photo here is a photo of what the forest looks like in that area. And so there's a lot of small trees, and specifically cedar, which when it dries out is very flammable. And these small trees that are very densely packed, they are really good ladder fuels for any kind of fire that could start even on the ground from, let's say, if you were having a really dry summer and someone dropped a cigarette, and these cedar trees were really dry, you can have fire quickly move up into the crowns, the tops of the trees when they're this densely packed. And there's a lot of fuels, woody fuels that are near the ground to carry that fire up to the top. And with crown fires, if you do get fires that get up into the top of trees, those become harder to suppress and put out, and the intensity is a lot higher, and so there's more chance of it spreading. So that's my short little presentation today. Just a couple more photos. This is just a home that is surrounded by vegetation. So you could see that fire could easily spread from this house if there were a fire in the home into the vegetation, as it's pretty much directly touching. And this other photo here I thought was another good one, shows how much woody fuel is on the ground, and that really carries fire quite easily. And this area is actually behind the senior center. So, another area that we identified was a small piece of municipal land that was near critical infrastructure, that being the senior's home, has quite a bit of fuel, and so a lot of this could get taken out to make it safer. And yeah, so that's my short presentation. I'm open for questions from council.
Thank you. Any questions from council? The 100,000 per year that is available, Chief Geddes obviously knows about that and how to apply and all that sort of stuff.
Yep. Through the mayor, that's correct. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, not a problem.
And have a great evening.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chief. 10.2 is a report by the Director of Community Planning titled Ucluelet Housing 2023 Update. Welcome back, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. I don't have a presentation on this. This is as really we have brought forward for some sort of update and context. With I thought it was important and timely, and we've been planning on bringing this forward anyways. But with the discussion earlier about the grant application, we want to just basically set that context, both on updating on some things that have been done in the past, and I think one of the things that comes out in it is that there's a number of different things that have happened, particularly between council taking, I think, a pretty proactive approach, and in the OCP adopting policy around how new rezoning applications and housing developments are approached, and sort of what is at an appropriate amount of, or setting the bar for attainable and affordable housing. And we've seen some of that playing out in some of the approvals of housing within the town. And there's a point there that we raise in that it's probably for a discussion more, perhaps for the strategic plan or other council discussion on that balance of tourist accommodation and particularly the bed and breakfasts and growth, and sort of where that goes in the context of housing and the housing need in town. So Perhaps it's been a long meeting already. I'll just see if there are any questions on particulars of this. Again, it's I think good context and a bit of an update on where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Councillor Anderson, I know you were impressed with this report.
Yeah, I don't have any questions offhand. I mean, yeah, it was the last part of the agenda. So, but it was I enjoyed it because there's a lot of context in here that I should know that I didn't know, and some of the history of how we got here, and above all, the fact that I think this is a snippet from 2021, and you can see what was accomplished in 2 years, which is pretty great. So. This was really helpful for me just to get a grasp of the direction that previous council, and you guys were going, and now, it was great to read that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Mafty, no? No, it was a great summary, so thank you for that. It's a great report.
Thank you, and apologies for it. It's sort of a report where it's kind of the accretion of information from past reports, and even this was done a bit on the fly because we've been kind of racing to get that grant together and understand it, and even having red line notes on an appendix. But it's like, well, just get the information in your hands. So it is definitely it's an ongoing part of, I think, what the district's going to be dealing with for some time.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Your handwriting could almost be a font. You've got a very specific type of. It's a pleasure to read.
Okay, council committee reports. Councillor Anderson.
Briefly, through the mayor, Section 6.3 of your procedure bylaw stipulates that meetings are adjourned no later than 3.5 hours after their commencement, unless council resolves to continue past that 3.5 hours. We are at 3 hours and 20 minutes at this point, so a resolution would be appropriate at this point in time.
Okay, let's have a motion to continue our meeting beyond 3.5 hours.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
New council bylaw.
Oh, and we have Councillor Hoare back again. Nice to see you. We just made a motion to extend our meeting past 3.5 hours. All in favor? Did I do that? Carried. Thank you.
Changing my mind.
All right, council committee reports. Councillor Anderson.
All right, I'll go quick here. There was two things that I was able to attend. There was the ACHN, the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network, the Table of Partners agenda. I first did the orientation session where we went through all the files, financials, background, and brought me up to speed on what they do, and then add the actual Table of Partners meeting, which was a couple of days after that, and I got to meet most of the people involved there. There's a presentation from BC Rural Health Network. I was able to learn quite a bit and go through some of the financials with them or look at their budget. So that was great. And I believe Marcy had just given us a presentation. So she's off on vacation for a bit, but things are moving forward there. And the other thing was the bilateral meeting on the NetPen transition from DFO. I sat in for the second meeting of that, and that was pretty interesting. Again, they're just entering their second phase of public consultation to be transparent about the idea of NetPen. I actually called DFO yesterday to see if they wanted me to do anything, and they said no. So I said, do you want me to talk to anyone local, Creative Salmon, whatever? And they're like, we got it. So I'll just observe. The only other thing I wanted to mention is last time we forgot, when we came back from the Christmas holiday, there were two pretty major fires in town, on boat fires. So I wanted to say, hats off to Fire Chief Geddes and the whole volunteer firefighter team. That was a horrific. Both those fires were really bad, and also the harbor master Kevin Courts. I saw some of the photos, and so thank you very much for that.
And they always happen at night for some reason.
Yes.
Great, thank you. And Councillor Hoare.
Can you guys hear me? I just wanted to give a shout out to the Pacific Rim Art Society for sponsoring the Missoula performance that I was at last week, because the kids did a lot of really good work and they produced a play inside of a week. So they auditioned on Monday and on Saturday they put on a full on play. So that was pretty fabulous to attend. Beyond that, I have nothing to report. I do have a library board meeting this coming Saturday morning, however, so I'll have more next time.
And is that the AGM, Councillor Hoare?
Yes, it is. So
Great.
in person required.
Yes, and they do provide lunch for that one, just so you know.
I'm on that already. No almonds.
No almonds, okay. Thank you. Councillor Kennington?
Nothing to report as far as past meetings. I am registered for tomorrow's Zoom meeting with the Urban Design Institute, Understanding Development Realities. I believe Sean is also registered for that. I don't know if anybody else is. Should be interesting.
Yes, I reached out to our CAO to ask if that would be a worthwhile Zoom presentation to attend, and hopefully it's not just urban-based. Hopefully it was an invitation to all elected Vancouver Island people. So, yeah, enjoy. And Councillor Mafty?
Nothing to report at this time.
Okay. I seem to be the one with all the meetings here. January 11th, I attended the Barclay Community Forest meeting. And just as a side note, they have some logs set aside at the Dryland Sort for Yuki Days, for logger sports. So hoping Miss Fortune has been made aware of that. Perfect, thank you. They also have a really interesting map. I don't know if the front office carries these or not, but it's the Recreation and Logging Road Guide to the Barclay Community Forest. And so if there aren't any available at the front desk, maybe just reach out to our directors on the board, and they've got box loads of these things. It's really interesting. January 11th, I attended the ACRD meeting, and the most interesting thing at that meeting was the 2023 assessment roll and how it affected all the municipalities and all the areas that are part of the ACRD. And District of Ucluelet came out with the highest market percentage change at 20.56%. And second was Tofino at 18.02%. And third, I thought was interesting, Hawaiiat First Nation at 18.01%. And then in fourth place was the Ucluelet government at 13.13%. So just really interesting that those are the four communities with the highest market percentage change in their tax assessment roll. January 18th, I attended the Alberni-Clayoquot Health Network Transportation Working Group. There were 3 representatives from Watt Consulting at that meeting, and they are the consulting group that the ACRD has asked to do a feasibility study to identify interim transportation options on the West Coast. So that whole meeting was more about getting those 3 reps from that Watt Consulting kind of up to speed on where we're at with our transportation issues here on the coast and what some possible options might be. So they've got their work cut out for them. But it was great to have that news release from Island Link that they are beginning bus service between Nanaimo and Tofino, which also includes us, 3 times a week starting on January 30th, using one of their 15 passenger vehicles. And effective May 18th, they will increase that to a daily service and operate the route year round. So that was really, really good news for those people that reached out to me as soon as Tofino Bus made their announcement of, ceasing operation until April. There are apparently a lot of people that don't drive or rely on the bus. So that was great for Island Link to jump in there. And then January 19th, I attended a Zoom webinar. It's called Toward Collaborative Governance and Shared Innovation. So this was part 1 of a 3-part panel series exploring the relationship between municipal and Indigenous governments in the past, present, and future. So it was a well worthwhile hour and a half, and I look forward to sitting in on parts 2 and 3. Any questions for me? Okay, question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions and provide comments on items that have been addressed on today's agenda. Items not related to today's agenda will not be heard. Are there any questions from the audience? That would be you, Mr. Olawa. Go ahead to the microphone if you like, because we're on Zoom.
My question does not relate to something that was already on the agenda, but everybody's. My concern is I've done a few trips up and down the island lately, and I always love it when I get home. But unfortunately, all the Nanaimo, all the welcoming signs that municipalities and cities have put up outside of their towns are lit up brightly, and it says we're open, come on in. When I return home here, I get to our junction sign for Ucluelet, which we spent tens of thousands of dollars on, and it's like we're closed. So I'm just curious as to why our Welcome to Ucluelet sign is not lit up. It kind of looks like we're closed for business.
I believe there is some money in the budget for lights. Am I right, Mr. Lawrence?
Through the RMI program, there's currently an allocation for decorative lights. Not sure if that would extend to lighting an existing sign, but we can look into it.
Because I agree, it's very dark when you reach that
It does
junction.
to me, it gives a very sad impression. I'd like to come home and see that sign lit up, and you got 6K in your home, but it also shows that we're open for business. So that would be my one question. But then relating to the agenda, what would throw us a carrot? How would you council look to replying to PAC RIM on their requests of the formation of a select committee?
It's an interesting idea. I think we will probably discuss that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You know where to get a hold of me.
Oh, I do. No other questions from our audience.
I have. I think this is more of a comment, but I received a communication from Ms. Lara Kemps, who just wanted to highlight regarding the discussion about landscaping at the junction, that the previous council was concerned about safety issues being addressed. Take that for what it's worth, but it's been communicated.
That was to do with the beautification of the triangles?
Yeah, I just got a text shortly after that discussion just clarifying. I'll read it verbatim once my phone cooperates here. It wasn't brought forward by previous council. We just wanted the junction safety issues addressed.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kemps. Have we received any questions by Zoom or telephone, Mr. Rotenberg?
No members of the public are on Zoom at this time.
And nothing by telephone and nothing by emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
Nothing by telephone. Refreshing community input now.
Nobody's on Zoom.
Nothing at community input at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. There is a closed meeting schedule. Council chambers is closed to the public during closed sessions. I move that the meeting be closed to the public in order to address agenda items under section 90, brackets 1, brackets C, brackets G, and brackets I of the Community Charter, which involve labor relations or other employee relations, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality, and the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And that is at 7:33. Can I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Councillor Mafty, all in favor? And carried.
Before you leave, Joey, can you just show me how to access that on the tablet?